Wonderful. Lisbeth, I will wait for your signal and then we will begin when we need to.
I just made you a co-host and everybody's here.
All right, wonderful. Everyone's here. All right, namaskar, everyone, and good evening from India. I usually do this particular class usually from my home in California, but I happen to be in India. So it turns out over the last few years, I think a third of my classes were done from India. Here we are. So happy to meet you, and I'm looking forward to the next 3 hours together. It's 10:30 in the night, and we'll go till about 1:30 in my morning. Allow me some degree of slowness in responding, but I'll do my best. All right. So if I can please have you join me in a quiet resetting meditation. So just sit comfortably. I'm going to flash quickly the prayer that we're going to chant. 1 second. I'm going to share the entire screen. What's going on? No? Okay. What do we got here? All right, we got here. This is good. And let me see if my little head is available somewhere here. Okay, that's too large. Little head. Okay, Lisbeth, am I looking all right? You can see a little tiny little me on the bottom left.
Perfect. You
Wonderful.
look great.
Thank you. So this is a classic opening prayer from the Hindu tradition. This is generally chanted at the beginning of discourse, which is how it's been done traditionally. And I'll tell you what it means before I guide you into this setting. The literal translation is, may we both be protected, may we both be nourished, may we work together with great energy, may our knowledge be radiant, may there be no differences or disputes between us. And then we'll chant Shanti 3 times, peace inside, around, and between. This is what it literally means. This is obviously written by some sort of a Sanskrit lawyer, because it seems to have a very directly legal formulation, uh, asking for protection, nourishment, knowledge, energy, and lack of differences. And this is important because essentially it's creating a sacred and safe space for all of us to be protected from the very dynamically dramatic world that we have outside us right now. It also seeks nourishment because for the work that we are going to undertake of the highest order, which is the gathering of knowledge, it's important to be nourished. Maybe work with great energy, of course, because that's how we will gain more knowledge in our work, and then our knowledge will be radiant. We will radiate this knowledge through our being into the universe. And then while we create an open and safe space, we allow room for differences or disputes during the conversation so that we're able to solve those, resolve those, and we end with no disputes and differences. We end together. So that's the prayer. And then the Shanti chant 3 times, the peace chant. I'm going to guide you through it. So just join me. Sit comfortably in any posture, sitting with your back straight. The back does not need to be stiff. Just relax your back. Back, neck, and head are in a straight line. You can close your eyes gently now. Just relax the expression on the face. Let the eyelids be closed gently. Relax the expression on the face. Let the tongue become heavy and fall down to the bottom of the mouth. Bring a gentle smile to your face. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. Let the feet be in full foot contact with the floor below, letting the feet rest completely on the earth below. Just relax. Now, as you breathe in, breathe into the belly and let the belly expand as you inhale. As you exhale, let go. Let go of your thoughts. Let go of your preoccupations. Let go of all unfinished business. Let everything go and feel a sense of relief sweep through the body. Breathing into the belly, let the belly expand. As you exhale, let everything go. Slow down the breath. If you'd like to join me in the chant, bring your palms together in Namaskar Mudra, pressing the palms together gently at the center of the chest. Pressing the palms together gently, letting the fingers touch each other, gently touching the back of the thumbs into the chest. Stay right here. Feel the vibration pulsating in your heart, radiating into the palms and then radiating out into the world. We're going to chant Om 3 times and then the opening prayer, Sahana Bhavatu. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Oh. Inhale, second Om. Oh. Inhale, third Om. Oh. Inhale and chant. Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vitvishavahai. Om. Take your arms behind you, grab your right wrist with your left hand, breathing in, stretch. Breathing out, bend forward in a deep sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in, release your hands. Rub your palms together to generate some heat, and then gently cup your eyeballs to transfer that heat, and then massaging the face and the head. Blink your eyes open and pull your palms back like an open book. Namaskar and welcome to the GST session on Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism. My name is Gaurav Rastogi, and the sound did cut out. I'm sorry. Okay, so the sound situation, let me fix that. It cuts out at the top, live performance audio, maybe, or echo cancellation. I'm not sure. Okay. It is designed not to cut sound, but we'll see what's going on. It does cut out at the ohm, so I apologize for that. Yeah, just during the ohm because I think it over resonates and then it cuts everything out. But there's silence. My name is Gaurav Rastogi. I am one of the founders and board members and dean at the Hindu Spiritual Care Institute. And I'm also a member of the board of trustees of GTU. And I'm frequently an interfaith speaker within the broader Bay Area. And, and as a result, I've been teaching this course at the Chaplaincy Institute for over 5 years, possibly 6 years. So it's a pleasure to join you. And I would like to congratulate you on your choice of vocation and the fact that you've chosen to take on spiritual care as a personal discipline of learning and practice. I congratulate you for that, and I thank you for your service both in the past and in the future. What you're doing is essential for restoring our sense of humanity, our sense of being a collective and in a collective species, a civilization even. That sense has been broken in recent years, and your work and the work of those that will follow you will help us restore this sense of connection, this sense uh, of being human together. So thank you for that. This conversation that we're going to have together, I have a presentation, and I usually do this in 3 or 4 parts, but I'm very susceptible to inputs from the audience. So if you have anything you want to ask, feel free to ask. We already, thanks to our Sanskrit lawyers, have created a safe space for us to converse. And so if you have any questions, things that are pressing, feel free to ask at any time, and I'll be happy to answer them. Nothing is too wild, too silly, too rude. It's just these are questions that if I am able to answer those for you, I'd be honored to take those on. So at any point you feel like typing those questions in, you can type them in, or you can raise your hand, or just speak up and we'll deal with it. That being said, This is day 3 of your GST. So how's everything coming along? It's a lot going through lecture after lecture, I understand. So I appreciate the the your ability to sit through this endless barrage of Zoom conversations. But it's Sunday morning. What's not to like? All right. So we do this conversation in several parts. I usually begin with a topical story of the day, which usually takes a whole hour. We have 3 hours together. Last year, at around the same time at the end of January, also I had landed. It turns out these classes, I always agree to them like 3 months ahead of time. And then, of course, fate intervenes. And last time I had just landed after whatever the 20-hour flight and then that very night, and so I haven't slept for about 48 hours by this time, and that very night at the same time I have this class. And as it turns out, it was the opening of a new temple in Ayodhya, and this was a massive historical event in India. And it was, so I spent an hour just describing what was going on, and that was fun. Today I have for you, bless you, Dana, today I have for you the story of the Kumbh Mela, which is a gathering that's happening around the world right now. Just give me a sec. Let me jiggle around my Wi-Fi for a second. 1 second. Sorry, I'm just rejigging my Wi-Fi because this fellow keeps dying on me and I get poor connection. So I'm going to jiggle right back. This is the joys of being in, at mom's home. All right, here we are with Wi-Fi intact, and hopefully we'll recover and go on to greater connections. All right. So may I ask you this question? Have you heard of the largest gathering of humans ever in the history of humanity? Have you heard of it? Yes, no, yes. A few have heard, a few have not. You have not, Tim has not heard. Tim, you're in for a great surprise. How much, how many people does it need to make it the largest gathering of humans in the history of humanity? So it is a tall claim, and trust me, it is not a beyond reason. How many humans does it take? Burning Man is like 70,000 people. So how many more can you cram into a sandy temporary township?
100 million.
100 million is huge. Are you kidding me, Aaron? 100 million is a lot, but I'll auction it out to the next bidder. Do I see 101 million anywhere? Anyone?
200,000.
200, okay, 200,000. Okay, that's a little more reasonable. The 3 times Burning Man is good. What else do we
1
got?
million.
Huh?
1 million.
1
1
million.
million.
1 million is reasonable. That's fantastic. All right, so we're between 200,000, 1 million, and 100 million. And guess who's closest to the number? Erin's closest to the number, but she's off by an order of magnitude. Would you believe it? That number is, and hold on to your seats and horses and everything else you got there, is 500 million. A half a billion people have been passing through a particular space for 45 days. That period is still underway. I'm here to tell you that story. I'm here to tell you that story because through that, I want to weave through the overall story of Hinduism and who we are as a people, what we believe, and what our practices are. This will take about an hour, and then we'll switch to spiritual care and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'd love to talk to you about. And then we leave some Q&A at the back. All right, so if you're ready for story time, I'm going to see if I can get myself a little more. Okay, so this is, I'm going to, okay. Hi, Shivani. All right. Okay. Okay. After you, that's all right. So Shivani, I got your note. You got it. Sorry. I'm just reading your note out as we speak, which is okay. So let's see. I'm going to see if I can share like, okay. What are you seeing? Okay. Let's just see what's going on. Okay. Voice isolation. Okay. You're seeing, okay. Are you seeing a screen? Oh, lovely. This is me. You see me? I'm floating around here somewhere in the 2/3. I love that. All right. Let me tell you the story of the Kumbh Mela. Kumbh literally means pitcher. And, and I'm going to begin with the story of unity in devotion. And this is an introduction to Sanatana Dharma. Hindus Hinduism itself is internally referenced. So Hinduism is like champagne in the sense that it's also a location marker, which is to say the people of the land of the Indus River are Hindus. And Indus River is, of course, ironically now in Pakistan, but hey, that's just history for you. But Hinduism, the word Hindu comes from that river, and the internally consistent name for Hinduism is Sanatana Dharma, which is how your GST course is named. And I will describe what it means in a second. Now, the story of the Kumbh Mela is all those people and then some at the edges of a river, not just a river, but the confluence of three rivers, two of which are visible, and the third is invisible, mythical, mystical, and possibly spiritual. And that's what you're seeing. Now, this crowd has been gathered there, a variant of these people, since the early parts of January and through to the end of February. They'll be standing here by the Ganga River and waiting for their turn to take a dip in the ocean. Now, but that I want to go back to 1968. This is before my time, but here's the deal. This is Paul Ehrlich. If you are concerned about the population bomb, you should thank Paul Ehrlich and his very famous 1968 book called The Population Bomb that set into motion this fear, this paranoia. I'm going to see if I can move. Can I move my? Are you still reading the whole thing? I can move myself around somewhere. So far, so good. You can read the whole thing. If you're not, I'll read it out for you. But in 1968, he wrote this book about the vast crowds of humanity that are now covering the earth. And his case in point, example number one was, of course, India. And so this is a very famous sentence, it's a paragraph that I've culled directly from his book, which is the streets seemed alive with people eating, people washing, people sleeping. I appreciate the fact that there's a comma between people eating and people washing. Without that comma, this would be very different. All right, people visiting, arguing, and screaming, people thrusting their hands through the taxi window, begging. People, as we move slowly through the mob, the dust, noise, heat, and cooking fires gave the scene a hellish aspect. This is a very famous extract from Paul Ehrlich's book, and this vision of a thronging masses of humanity, of course, is a cliche of the Western mind, and indeed set off the population bomb and the scare all around the world. And of course, we're now looking at hopefully peak population anytime now and steep depopulation by the end of this century. And all of that can trace back to one trip to India from this. And I'm going to tell you that it does not need to be hellish to have people all around you thronging and rushing around and so on. And those are some of the stories and visuals I want to show you. The Kumbh itself, Kumbh literally means pitcher, Maha means great. And so the Kumbh is a festival, it's a religious gathering. Think Burning Man, but many times larger already every time it happens. And it happens every 12 years and so at every site, it happens once every 12 years. There are 4 sites, so they rotate every 3, 4 years until it cycles around. Now, why 12 years? It is linked to the cycles of Jupiter. And so Jupiter, of course, goes through all the constellations in that one cycle. And then over a 12 times 12 year cycle, it does a whole circle around and comes to the exact spot where it was 144 years ago. This year was special, and I'll come to that in a second. So the Kumbh Mela, Kumbh is, like I said, this gathering, Mela means gathering. It happens once every 3 years in one of these 4 locations that are laid out for you. This is a map of India. It's somewhat, I don't know, not representative, but we'll deal with it. But these 4 cities, Haridwar, Prayagraj, Ujjain, and Nashik, these are all holy river sites. And the highest of those is the one that's happening this year at Prayagraj. Prayagraj means the supreme confluence, literally. And so it's a confluence of 3 rivers. And I'll come to that in a second. And at that confluence, and I'll show you a photo, the coming together of 2 visible rivers and a third one is the spot everyone's trying to get there. and take a dip in the sacred river. And it is believed, we believe that this cleanses our sins and grants us liberation. But liberation from what? Liberation from the endless coming and going, not endless heaven. We don't believe in that sort of thing, because the Hindu tradition in general begins with an insight, not about the nature of God, but an insight about the nature of reality and the cyclicity of it. So the earliest hymns and poems in the Hindu tradition are hymns recognizing the rhythmic nature of reality, of nature, rhythms in nature. That word, rhythm, the Sanskrit for that is rit. And so obviously it comes from some shared word root. So the original OG Hindus were commenting on the fact that there's repetition. Everything happens cyclically. And so that understanding of time, annual time, but also cyclical time itself, creation and then destruction and creation again, that is very deeply embedded into the Hindu tradition. And cyclicity is built into the Hindu tradition. So our original thoughts were not about the nature of God or some sort of a spoken revelation from God directly, but simply everything seems to be in order. Everything seems to work as scheduled and planned. And and so what might be the reason for this order? What might be the way this order projects itself? And are there ways to think of the order outside and the order inside in a analogous manner? And those questions led to deep and profound insights that became the tradition that we know now as Hinduism. Deep philosophy, deep nature, deep celebration, and I'll show you a lot of those as we go along. All right, so the Kumbh happens once every 12 years in each location, 3 years across each, and then 144 years is 12 times 12. Then Jupiter has made one full circle with all the precessioning and so on. Now it's back exactly where it was 12 times 12 cycles ago. That happens to be this year. And boy, did it get busy. It got really busy. And imagine twice, almost 1.5 times the population of the United States passing through a small place. It's crazy. It's even for India, that's crazy because that's a third of the population that's just going through one specific place. So, a lot going on. But what's the backstory? Let me tell you a little bit of backstory, and that might be fun. I'm going to turn my video off, or let me just turn the little guy face hair thing on. So you see my little face. There you go. Now you don't need to, and I'll move this guy around so you can see the QR code if you want to hear the rest of the story. So what's behind the story? The story is quite interesting. There was once a time that from the kingdom of the heavenly creatures, the Devas, the goddess of wealth felt dishonored and disrespected and disappeared into the ocean. And when she disappeared on the ocean, without wealth, there is no order because you can't maintain anything. Now they needed to go find the goddess of wealth, and she's of course beneath the ocean. Now they need to go through a whole bunch of stuff from the ocean, and the devas, guys on the left with the multicolored rainbow coalition over here, and the asuras, not good guys, previously family but not good guys in at this point in the historical telling. And PS, they might just be Iranian people for all I know. All right. So they was roping quite literally their cousins, the Asuras, the not good guys, and they say, look, we got to work together and churn the ocean. And so you will notice the turtle over here, and on top of the turtle, they get a whole mountain, the Mandara mountain, and then the cosmic snake of time is now used to churn the ocean. A lot of hard work goes in, and eventually they find poison first. Poison comes out, and poison must be consumed. So Shiva over here consumes the poison, and he holds it in his throat because he's a yogi. He consumes the poison, holds it in his throat, which now becomes blue colored, and he of course does not die. She was just doing fine. And then eventually comes Amrita. Amrita means the elixir of immortality, and that is what the good deal is. So that also comes, and then of course the goddess of wealth comes out herself. And so the elixir of immortality must be dealt with. And at this point, the good guys and the bad guys. Now you remember in the story of the Bible, true, there is the tree of immortality, right? Of course, the knowledge of good and evil, and the other tree of immortality, whose fruits are must not be eaten. So this is the elixir of immortality. And now the asuras, good guys, do not want the devas, good guys, don't want the asuras, bad guys, to have this immortality thing because that could be trouble. And so they need to get rid of it. And so they ask Vishnu over here to please take away with it. So he puts it into a pitcher, that elixir, and he runs away with it. And while he's running away, 4 drops fall onto the earth at those 4 places that you saw on the previous slide. And so the backstory is this is the pitcher carrying the elixir of immortality, and those 4 drops of elixir fall on those 4 spots on the earth. And therefore, those spots is where the saints and regular people gather to celebrate again to Jupiter's cycle. So that's the backstory of the churning of the oceans. And if you're interested in the story, grab your phone, scan the QR code, and order me. This is not one of those restaurant QR codes. You can actually hear the story if you like. And it's a fun story. You can go read it and so on. It's a fascinating, very interesting story. That being said, so now that's the reason Kumbh is celebrated. That's the backstory for what's going on right now. But along with what that, I've told you a whole bunch of associated uh, philosophy in the Hindu tradition. This is the serpent of time, cosmic time, the creation, what's left at the end of dissolution. So everything, all this world is created, and then eventually it's dissolved, and then after some time recreated again. I said some time, but time itself has been created and destroyed. So there must be something outside of time. This serpent represents that which does not change, even from creation to creation. The turtle, of course, is similar to many other traditions where it's turtles all the way down. We know that famous story from Vadit Feynman. And of course, you heard the story of, okay, this is, let me find Shiva, who's got a blue throat somewhere. I'm trying to find him. Maybe he's sitting here. I'm not sure. I can't tell. What does it say? The god of, okay, water. This is Varuna, I think. I'm trying to find Shiva here. He's got a blue throat because he's got poison, but they're collaborating. They're all obviously working together. The other backstory I told you, I hinted at, these people might be Iranian because later, this goes way back in time. We're talking about several thousands of years ago. The Asuras, if you look at what the Zoroastrians are saying and the Iranians say, their gods, their good guys are called Ahuras, and their bad guys are called Devas. You figure that we're calling their guys bad guys and our guys good guys and vice versa. They must have had something in common before. A lot of history goes into it, is the point, that there's a lot of memory that goes into it. And of course, I told you about our attitude toward wealth. We're a very abundance driven culture. And therefore, the goddess of wealth is important because not for our pursuits, but for the working of the world itself, she is important. And so we must seek her out. And in this case, even if it requires you to trade with your adversaries, so be it. You got to trade because that's how business is done. And so global trade. So you got a whole bunch of ideas about Hindu views of cosmology, but also our views of economics, politics, history, philosophy, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's just one story. And that's a theme. Now, the astrological basis for the Kumbh is when there's a specific planetary alignment between Jupiter, which is Brihaspati, and Sun, which is Surya, and the Moon. Now, the Hindus in general follow a lunisolar calendar. Our religious calendar is lunisolar, obviously not Georgian calendar, evidently, but also lunisolar because it tracks both what's happening to the sun and the moon and all the planets. So we're looking at the zodiac, of course. We're also looking at the planets transiting through the zodiac. And so you see when Jupiter's in Kumbh, that's at one place and then another place and so on and so forth. So this is important. Now, the reason I call this out, and I specifically called it astrology, where I should have called it astronomy, because this has nothing to do with astrology, but it has everything to do with astrology. In the Hindu system, astronomy and astrology are not two different things. And a lot of observations went into this stuff. When you need to track the movements of Jupiter, you need to work really hard. And why is that? Let me see. Okay, are you still seeing? You're still seeing me. Okay, good. Now I'm extra large size. When you need to track the movements of Jupiter, you're going to have to watch the planet every day after another day. And in 12 years, you'll get one cycle. And if you're tracking Jupiter and Saturn, in 60 years, they'll come together. And that's why a lot of things are in multiples of 60, even in the Roman and Greek calendars, because they're tracking the coming together of Jupiter and Saturn at one point. Now, it takes a lot of societal resources to get something like that, because now you have to set up observatories and pay people to track this over long periods of time, the rising of the sun, the gathering of the data, the assembling of tables. It's not something that you would do under stress. And you have to do this over long periods of time. So it's the fact that there's some sort of a understanding of the skies is representative of long periods of wealth and abundance and excess, the ability to spend that time just staring at the stars and the planets and tracking what's moving against what, and then creating a whole backstory and cultures around it. So this goes back tens of thousands of years. And of course, the constellations are common to many old civilizations. So clearly, there's been conversation before the internet, thank God. And so, anyway, the Kumbh Mela clock works in this particular manner. So every 3 years, we rotate around. And as you can tell, Jupiter's moving, and so on. And that's what's going on all this while. All right. Now, the other thing now you will obviously observe, and I have many colorful photos, so you'll enjoy this overall thing. Rivers are sacred. Everything is sacred in the Hindu tradition. Trees are sacred, of course, and you already know famously cows are sacred, but rivers are sacred too, because rivers are personified as goddesses, and they symbolize life, purity, and renewal. Obviously, they are centers of civilization. You cannot live without access to plain drinking water. And the rivers have housed entire societies. The Indian civilization itself is named after the river Indus. And so rivers are important. And if you look at the older civilizations of the Indus Valley and the Saraswati Valley and so on, Saraswati river civilizations and so on, there's a lot of history that goes into those civilizations that were living by the river and trading by the river and were treating the river as extremely sacred, almost so sacred that the river is like mother. And that's what I'll cover in the next slide. And so bathing in these rivers is believed to is to wash away sins. Now, I hasten to add that I'm using an English word, sins, but we don't quite use it in the same manner as the sort of Christian framework. We don't, but anyway, for lack of a better translation. And the liberation is a liberation not of going to heaven forever. Again, that's how I got into that loop about how our cosmology. Our heaven also is a temporary thing. You go and you come back because there's no forever. And the liberation is liberation from the cycle of going and coming, of being born and dying and born and dying and born and dying again. And this coming and going gets tiresome. And so, how do you get released from that? There's a sacred river for that. And so, we usually chant the seven rivers names: Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Narmada, Godavari, Krishna, and Kaveri. And these are rivers in the geography of India, as you'll see, north to south in a particular direction. And they're all sacred. And that's really important for us. And bathing in these rivers is considered sacred. Again, and the backstory of the Ganga, of course, I'll come to that, is the mother of purity. And Ma literally means the same thing in English as it does in Sanskrit, which is mother. So Mother Ganga is a goddess who's pure and purity giving, and she's descended from heavens. And so she's gone to heaven, and from Vishnu's big toe, she's flowing out and then falls to the earth in this torrent, and then Shiva has to catch her in his hair locks, and then she starts to flow because she's so strong. If Shiva doesn't catch her, then all earth will be washed away and so on. So he has to catch her, and then she flows through the river. And like I said, you go to the river, and along the river are many sacred sites, and you would go there to, of course, take a ritual bath, like I described, but you would also go there to offer holy water, sacred water to the ancestors, which is a practice that people do of course, for their ancestors, and some on a daily basis, some annually, some once in a lifetime, and so on. And also this practice that you're seeing of lighting these ghee lamps, and I'm sure you all know what ghee is. It's clarified butter, and so these are lamps made from ghee and cotton, and this is a very elaborate, elaborate. Sorry. This is a very elaborate celebration, and not just celebration, but a ritual. And now, over the years and decades, it's become more and more elaborate. You could previously just have one little tiny lamp over here, and that would do fine. But now we have these mega lamps. These are very heavy metal lamp holders, and it's quite a show. And there are several of these young men that are doing this. They're moving it around, so it's very fascinating and it's very amazing. I once watched it at this spot, but on a boat somewhere out on the river. Right here is the river, by the way. You can't see in the dark, but over here is the river. And you could take a boat, and now you could watch this entire thing. It's very fascinating. On a full moon night in 2012, in the middle of summer, and so midsummer night. And that's where my wife and I took a boat ride and watched this. Very fascinating show, very fascinating and very sacred. The whole experience itself is very sacred, and so on. So this happens at the riverbank in many cities around the riverbank. And so I want to give you a sense of the devotional fervor that goes into this. I want to, just as an aside, I just want to stop you from showing this thing. I run temple tours at the neighboring temple in Livermore, and people from nearby churches, interfaith councils, and so on come by and visit. It's always fun. And I did this tour, what was it, last year? And Ruth, I love Ruth. She's amazing. And then she's come to the temple before, but I took her this time, and this time, again, people, the whole place was thronging with people. There was something going on. And by two-thirds of the whole thing, Ruth just needed some fresh air. She's like, I'm hot of here. There's too much going on because it's very colorful. It's a lot of things going on. There's sound, there's smells, there's movement, there's a theory, geometry, there's a lot going on. So I just want to warn you that there's this is, of course, just an online thing, but trust me, when you come to the temple, it's just a lot. So anyway, I continue. All right, now this, of course, you can tell is a meeting of two separate river bodies. You can tell from the waters, right? And so this third river is invisible. It is believed that third river also goes underground and comes back and meets at this place. And therefore, this part is called Triveni. Three means the same thing in English as it does in Sanskrit, which is three. Triveni is the meeting of the three rivers. Sangam means the coming together, confluence. So it's the confluence of three rivers. This nose is where the action's at. So every one of those 500 million people are trying to get to this place. The government is trying to push people to other places, saying, really, it's the same river. You can go here or here. You don't all need to come right here. And you know how things are. But this is where people are trying to get to. And during this auspicious time, extra bonus points. And So that's where all the joy and excitement is. But you can see how already there's a lot of people. But the government this time is run by people that kind of know how to organize these things. Over the last 10 years, it's been the same state government, and they've been amping up the quality of infrastructure. So it's all plastic free, clean water, clean air. I mean, the whole thing, they've tried a lot to streamline everything so that it's people come. So their estimates went up. They were initially expecting 300 million because it's a small scale thing. And then because it was so good that since January, the hype has gone up, and now people are still going. And there are a few days in the schedule where I think twice, three times during this 45-day period when it's peak, like over the top demand. And then that time, I don't even know how many people there are at that place, but they've run it reasonably well. There has been a stampede or two, one in Delhi and one at this exact spot, but it was contained in 15 minutes. People did die, but it's in double digits and not large numbers. It is terrible, but they've generally tried to keep a control over crowd management and everything. So anyway, the point is, it's a lot of scale that's required, and that also is a story about a resurgence of faith, a continuity over hundreds of generations of a sense of belief, where I know for a fact that my ancestors and their forefathers all the way back would have done the same thing, would have made the same trip, would have taken the same dip. And therefore, this is a river in time. And while time passes, the river does not. And the river continues to be where it is. And in that sense, you're bathing in endless time. And that's what's going on. By the way, what you're seeing here, just so that you can get more insight, these lines are holding back. These are buoyed and holding back, so people don't just accidentally swim away into the unknown or possibly into the Bay of Bengal. And so these are all contained places. And there's boat rides outside, so you can go in and out with boats. A lot going on, basically. All right, moving right along. The Hindu view of time, I wanted to come to that because it's important for you to understand, is that it's cyclical. This is actually the wheel of time from a temple on the east side of India, and it shows you time, the wheel of time, and it shows creation, preservation, and destruction. And so this understanding that there is endless time is important to our sense. And that's why when you come at Hindu views of death itself, we're not really afraid of death because, as Apu says, what is it in Simpsons? What does he say? He says, "Thank you, come again." You're going to say thank you and come again. It's all right. You're going to be okay. So there's no permanent going. So the stakes are much lesser, so to speak, with Hindu versions of death because you're going to be back. It's all right. Go. And so because of that, this cyclicity, Hindus have a deeper, more poignant sense of time. It's not linear time going from one eternity to another eternity. It comes and goes, repeats, and the same cycle, the same patterns repeat. Groundhog Day like almost. And that's the interesting thing with the things. The Kumbh itself aligns with cosmic rhythms to mark these periods of spiritual renewal. And so those cycles are, of course, you've heard the exclamation by Jove. Jove, of course, is Jupiter. And so by Jupiter, we look at Jupiter and it's positioned next to Aquarius and Sun and the Moon and Capricorn. That's when we know this is going on. So a lot of astrology going on. This, of course, is a different thing. This is showing Jupiter and Saturn coming together in 2020. But I just wanted to show you this because it's such a cool image that Jupiter and Saturn over several days are now finding their way together. And then see you later 60 years from now, because that's how long it takes for these two to come together again. And the external cosmos and the internal cosmos are deeply linked, which is another thing I want to point out to you here, that the macrocosm, the world outside, and the microcosm, the world inside, are deeply linked. And you will see that our sense of time itself is also driven by that. But Even the holy rivers, you'll see, have their analogs inside. How so? Right here. And this is, by the way, this is all clickbaity in the sense that this is a Western audience. So I would be remiss to not show you colorful saints with ash smeared on their faces. This is, of course, very classic. These are Naga sadhus. These are renunciates that do bear arms, that are very, very pious, very holy. They're renunciates, but they're this together. They're very tightly knit together. It's about over 1.5 million people across India, and this is a long tradition going back as far as we know of people renouncing. Some of these are educated engineers, aerospace guys, military men, real like people with really interesting educated backgrounds that have left everything because they have now renounced the world and have become renunciates and have joined the order of monks, which this is one order of monks. And the Kumbh literally is a coming together of these saints at the river. The rest of us, regular people, are only there part, like this one guy here. Mainly, it's their coming together that is being celebrated. But I digress. I was telling you that the coming together of the channels, you've seen this chakra chart from your yoga studio, of course. And that's literally what the yoga studio is telling you, is that the autonomic nervous system, the autonomic and the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems are what? Fight or flight or rest and digest. You remember those from your yoga classes. Those are here. So rest and digest is the moon nostril. The fight or flight is the sun nostril. And these are two rivers. Now, if you remember the two colored rivers I showed you in the back, watch this one and this one. Now, one of those rivers, the Ganga, is actually the calmer river that is represented by the moon. And the Yamuna is the hotter river and is represented by the sun. And I do know this for a fact because I went all the way to the temple at the beginning of this river, the Yamuna River. I'm actually, as I speak, I'm about 5 miles from the river, from where I'm sitting right now. But the beginning of the river, when you go to the top, where the glaciers are melting, essentially it's a hot water spring. And so you can bathe in those hot water springs. There's a glacier, yes, there's a glacial melt, yes, but also there's a hot water spring. And so this river, the Yamuna River, is essentially the hot river. This is the cold river. Those are always running across our nostrils. But there's a third river, which is the Sushumna Nadi. So if you see there are three here, 1, 2, and 3, the third is not visible, it's a spiritual channel. And so these are the three channels that work within us. The third channel is only the spiritual channel. Ordinarily, you would not experience that, but after much practice, you would become sensitive to it. And that's the one where the joy juice is flowing the most. And then at the confluence of these is where all the excitement is. So the same thing that I showed you in the world outside, two rivers, one hot, one cold, and one invisible, same deal here. Where they come together is where the unfolding of all this sacred spirituality happens. So you can see that the world outside is also representative of the world inside that we experience. But also, I hope you understand, I've linked a whole bunch of yoga and like the posture yoga philosophy to a physical manifestation of 500 million people coming to one specific riverside. So it's very deeply embedded. These are not by the way or coincidental. They're deeply embedded into the Hindu tradition. All right, moving right along. And of course, hosting 500 million people, of course, is the largest in human history. They've set up a temporary city with complete sanitation, tents, healthcare, accommodation, food supplies, a whole bunch of stuff. And then They have, of course, you can't do any modern thing in India without someone paying for a laser show. So what you're seeing is an image of a laser show that's happening on the river. And this is, I think, Shankaracharya, who's one of the old sages from the 8th century. And if you look at modern India, it owes a lot to this particular saint who, by the age of 32, 1 year short of Jesus, by the way, he was finished, he was done. His entire life work was done. But the modern saints, that many, those 10 orders of saints trace back to this one particular personality. And so anyway, that's what you're seeing. So anyway, the preparations, the whole setup is plastic free. It's great waste management. It's a solid example of managing human logistics because the scale here is just so much. It's just a very intense sort of thing. So there's a lot of modernization is the point I was trying to get to, that we're in the Hindu tradition in general, the tradition keeps evolving. So like I showed you the Aarti, the extra large, like mech, like the whatever, the large version of that Aarti is a recent phenomenon, as are these laser light shows. But it's a tradition that continues to evolve. And the other things I want to point out, again, I paint for you a little montage or just a collage of images, regular people. So there's a lot of, if you read US civics, school civics books, they describe a religion which has, which is poverty and caste and whatever else you see. And you tell me, you look at these images, you think you see any poverty of human emotion and devotion? Do you see any separation of people based on who they are and where they come from, what their families are? It's impossible to do. And so there is tremendous equality. No one asks you your name or your background or your family history. You're just another devotee and you're welcome. And so that's important. Also shows you historical continuity. India has been ruled by invaders for a long period of time, nearly 800 years. And yet the tradition continues, and as a mark of respect for our ancestors who continued these practices, we go when we're called to go. And so there's continuity, and the devotion is unparalleled. People that have come, even from California, I know colleagues that have gone there, friends who have gone there, and they come back transformed, moved by the experience of this whole thing, and impressed, of course, with the infrastructure, but also moved by the experience of taking this dip, which is something that our ancestors would have also taken. You're also seeing unity in diversity, of course, people from all walks of life. CEOs have gone there, leaders of countries have gone there, and it's all good. You're all in the same river, taking the same dip. And women here all the time participating very eagerly and with a lot of devotion and love. And the other thing you're going to see is a lot of celebration through music and dance and in community bonding. Of course, flowers being thrown around all the time. You're also seeing a story of cultural resurgence. There's a flourishing of the traditional arts and crafts. Things are being revived. And there's a renewal that's happening underway. And that's a lot that you can take away from this. I'm going to now play this. You're able to hear this. I'll lower the volume a little.
चवालीस साल बाद महाकुंभ का वो स्नान करने के लिए
और मधुबनी जिला है मिथिला का, वहाँ यहाँ पर
So I'm just trying to show you just
से रिजाइन है कि पूरे विश्व में जब कभी भी
okay, hold on. I think I crossed over. Okay. Sorry. this guy just forward. Sorry. I just want you to see the people. Look at this.
की शिक्षा ग्रहण करने जा रहे हैं
यस्य चान्दयाजिन्दो रगादस्य नगागुणा सेव्यतामक्षयोधीरा स्वसिद्धे च अमृताय च.
All right, I'm going to stop here. That kid, by the way, that you're seeing is chanting in Sanskrit. It's not a language he speaks, but it's something that he's learned and chanted. So you see, there's a lot of joy and celebration. So I just want to give you the sense of a vibrant, thriving, resurgent, and very complex and involved tradition that's difficult to see and difficult to see through from all the cliche and the stereotypes that you might have seen or heard. So I wanted to give you a sense of the chaos and celebration in Hinduism. And I'll end this section with a joke I make all the time at interfaith meetings, because I was once asked, what was it, in 2019, to give us a talk on your congregation, which my headline for that talk was simply, Hindus don't congregate, we crowd. So we don't have congregations at the temple in the traditional sort of church style. We don't have special days. Every day is special. We're not like a weekend club. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday deal. We go when we feel like it, at that time, the solar or lunar year, and so on, and always crowding, always people everywhere. But I want to tell you that Paul Ehrlich was wrong. It is possible for people to go to a place and for it not to be hellish. You just have to look past the crowds and see the sentiment, the love, the devotion, the fervor, and a sense of obligation, a connection with the past that is difficult to see until you look carefully. And so this anti-humanity thing that population is bad, population is not bad. Bad population is bad, but it is possible for humans to thrive and feel a sense of abundance and connection. And I wanted to give you a sample of that through this story. I'm going to pause here. I covered a lot of distance. I hope I've sort of prompted you to think about things and ask me questions at this point.
Just a logistical question. Can we get access to these slides?
Yes, but you got to pay me big bucks. I'll send it to you. I'll send it over to you. No problem. It's the largest presentation, but I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I am recording this. I'll send you the recording as well, which is typical of how we do this. All right, and any reflections? Anyone feel overwhelmed by the sort of very fast move through history and sort of philosophy?
I have a
Wendy,
question.
please. Yes.
First
Wendy,
of all,
go
thank
ahead.
you so much for your presentation. It was really enjoyable and I learned a lot. You mentioned, though, that you said I'm using the American word sins and we don't speak about sins. Can you explain that further?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that wonderful question. So the Western, the Judeo-Christian Islamic view of sin is, of course, goes all the way back to the OG original sin. And essentially this birth is sinful and so on. And it's a thing that you need to shake off or seek repentance for and so on. That's not at all the sense. So it's two things that I want to tell you. One is, and because we're not native English speakers, we inherit a whole bunch of words and then we now have to disinherit those. One of those is God-fearing. I'm a very God-fearing person. Hindus don't fear God because we're not separate from God. We're not distinctly different from God. We're just a manifestation of godly reality. Original. Gangster, OG means original. They just think of it as OG, original. Sorry, I'm using a modernism. I just think of original is the right word. Okay. So we don't think of God as a distant person 60 miles above the earth's surface, bearded and angry and wrathful and always looking to respite. That's not our sense of God. God is immanent and transcendent simultaneously. We are all manifestations of the same divinity. And because of that understanding that we're not separate from God, we're just a manifestation of the same divinity. You and I are also. And so the idea of sin, what we call papa and punya, are essentially the forgetfulness of our own inner nature, our true nature, is the only mistake that we made. We associate ourselves with this name and form, but then this name and form is subject to death and decay. But our true self is divine because we are part of and one with this underlying divinity that is all at play in making us. So in that sense, the Hindu tradition does not have the same sense of sin. We do, however, have good accountants, not just Sanskrit lawyers. And so there's a strong sense of accounting in the Hindu tradition. And it's a word I guarantee you all heard, which is karma, which is not, as it turns out, we say in English, a female dog. The karma is not a female dog. Karma is a completely different sense of accounting there, that the things that we do that are in keeping with our inner nature and the requirements of the overall cosmic dance, those don't have any footprint of karma on us. They don't cost us in karma dollars. But things that are outside of that, things that we do for our own self and selfish nature, that has a karma imprint. And then therefore what goes around comes around, where there's a bank of karma that you're doing plus and minus. And so good things happen to bad people sometimes, and bad things happen to good people. But that's because over multi-life time frames, you balance that out. So that's how we look at the world. Karma is a accounting procedure in that sense. We don't need a wrathful God to pass judgment. It's just math, is how the Hindus look at it in general. So the sin itself, something that we need to atone for or to get rid of, that's not at all a sense that we use in the Hindu tradition. Again, we use words approximately. It's the same with meditation. I teach Hindu meditation, and I use air quotes here, but it's not really meditation, because meditation is a word we have from Marcus Aurelius, who is thinking about a particular topic, and he's calling it meditation. That's not quite the same thing at all. In the Hindu tradition, some of you might have already done yoga and philosophy. You're not thinking about a topic. This is not an affirmation type deal. You're trying to go beyond words. And that is not meditation in the English sense, but we use an approximate word because it's, the language of discourse right now is English. So we got to translate and pick the nearest word. But usually you'd have to go look at the original sources, and the Sanskrit words tend to be more complex, more nuanced, and require more explanation because of that. So it's something that I too am learning. I'm an Anglophone in the sense that I speak and think in English, because that's the education I went through. I grew up in India. I've been in California for 25 years. But because I speak and think in English, I have to reacquaint myself with the idiom and the words in the Hindu tradition to truly, fully understand what's being said. Because if I only pay attention to the English, I'm looking at a highly truncated and sort of Disney-fied version of what was being said and transmitted. So I give you a long answer, Wendy. I apologize, but that's the sin question. I hope I answered your question, at least, if not over-answered the others. All right. Other questions or reflections on the seething, thronging masses of humanity that I just showed you?
A number of times you use the word resurgent, and the things are really coming back, maybe to energized in a way they haven't been. And being American, don't really know much about the politics of India at this point, but we hear about Modi and who he is or what from a very great distance. So I'm just curious if there's a correspondence there.
Yeah. So Modi is a sort of a latest in a sort of civilizational wave. So let me just back up and tell you what's going on. There's a sense of being a civilizational force, a sort of a glacier that moves slowly but very decidedly in a certain direction. And so the sense of self that Hindus and people of India in general, not necessarily just professing the Hindu faith, the sense of continuity that we have with deep time is a very deep sense of self, that we're a civilization that has existed from the time the pyramids were around, before the Stonehenge was built, and so on. And there's a continuity. Not that we're great, we are great, but the point is all these other great civilizations They're not here to describe to us what's written on the pyramids or why the Stonehenge was built. There's a break in the civilizational transmission of those ideas. But that's not the case with us, where there's continuity. And we speak the same language, we can read and understand and chant the same things like the young child I was showing you. And so there's a sense of self that had been subdued and, in fact, manipulated for reasons of divide and conquer in the Roman manner, right? So divided et impera, right? Which is divide and conquer. Conquer is a traditional, it's for 2000 years, has been the policy of the Roman government as it went into new lands to find ways to drive schisms in the population and then separate them, and then you can rule over them because they're forever going to fight each other. So we have been subjected to many rounds of that. And there's a sense that it needs to, we're still a continuous civilization, and we need to honor our legacy. We need to remember who we are. And that has led to Modi coming to power. That was 10 years ago. But he's a symptom of that, he's not a cause of any of that stuff. The underlying democracy in India is vibrant. 900 million voters, if you can believe the numbers, and 700 million of those voted. And so it's a very vibrant, thriving, like chaotic democracy. But the way it's run, the population wants its memories to be restored, wants its pride and sense of self to be restored, and that's the resurgence that you're seeing, where for example, when I was presenting this last year, the temple that was launched, the same, by the way, the presentation I was showing you, the next slide onwards was last year's presentation. After 500 years of the temple being broken down as a way to spite the Hindus, the local Hindus, there was an old temple that was broken down. And then since then, there's been a property dispute. This particular lawsuit was running for 138 years, if I remember my numbers correctly. And so a very patient legal lawsuit that went on for 138 years, that was eventually won by the Hindu side because, funnily enough, this is an interesting backstory. The backstory is that in Indian law, not Hindu law, in Indian law, in a temple, if there's a deity in a temple, there's a temple to a deity, that deity is considered to be a small child and continues to reside in that. Those are two very important things. The deity is a young child and therefore is a ward of the state. He or she must be taken care of, and they continue to reside in that until into infinity. Why that's important is that the lawsuit was settled on that. As long as you showed that there was a temple here, if you could prove that, then the young deity is resident here, because that's just the law. And so that's how the lawsuit was adjusted. But the resurgent part is essentially a long, patient struggle to go through the law court. You could run population dynamics and, as they use a biblical term, to smite the heck out of the other guys. But no, very long, patient struggle through the legal process and doing it. More recently, I'll give you another example of resurgence. Nothing to do with Modi himself, but in a city close to where I was born, there is another city. In fact, I was born right next to that city, and there's a lawsuit going on where there's a particular property that has a religious building of another religion, but it was built on top of a Hindu temple. And then obviously the same rules apply, because again, the deity is a small child who continues to live there. And again, lawsuit. And then they go in and do some research, and they of course find that, of course, there's a temple inside. But not just that, they found all the wells. If you look at historic Hindu texts, it remembers this city as a very sacred Hindu city. And it says there are wells here and here, there are temples here and here. And guess what? Lo and behold, all those wells are being discovered. They'd been boarded over, shut down, built houses over, but they went back and started checking. Every one of those are still around. So clearly there's a memory of being attacked. There's a memory of being ruled. and there's a memory and a desire to return to 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 former glory. So you might say this is the Make India Great Again, which Modi already said that. But the point is that there's a sense that this civilizational force has had its bad 1,000 years, thank you very much, and then now it's time to come back to its original abundance, but also this original connection to the land and to everything that's happening in the cosmos. So there's a very strong sense of that. The Modi government itself, depending, the Western media tends to project him as a sort of a right-wing Hindu nationalist, but if you see what his policies are, they're actually quite left-wing because he's essentially a socialist kind of guy. He's sending money to about 80 million people, or no, a large number of people, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of people, are getting food sent to them, money sent to them. So extremely left-leaning in terms of how the public distribution stuff is being done and so on. His policies tend to be very socialist, very left-leaning, very Democrats would be pleased with it. But his voting base is primarily Hindus that want him to do more for Hindu causes. So that's the situation that you're seeing. He maintains amazing relationship with, other than the one country to our left, which is Pakistan, every other Muslim country has given them the highest honor in their country. And it isn't that Modi has a anti-Muslim image in countries other than Pakistan. And Pakistan has its own set of problems. We're not getting into that. The point is that Modi himself is representative of an underlying desire to return to a memory that we have carried for long, and have patiently held on to that memory. And so when you're seeing Kumbh, the reason I said resurgence several times is there is no reason for a third of the country to visit a place in 45 days. Just no reason. Previously, there'd be 1/10 of that numbers that would have gone, and that would still 30 million is a large number, right? But no, what's happened now is that one, the infrastructure is great. The guy running the state does a good job of infrastructure, but also that people feel this sense of pride. People are no longer embarrassed about their sense of connection to this, which the early governments in India were socialist, Fabian socialists, so very British socialist, so anti-religion period. And so through the early education system in India, the English education system tends to be anti-religion and especially anti-Hinduism because that's the majority religion here. And so you're trained from early childhood to be embarrassed about this connection to religion. But now that training is being undone. And so that's the reason a lot of urban people that, people that I know, that I would never see going to a religious thing earlier, have now, all my friends have gone and they have posted photos, they're very proudly showing it. And so there's a sense of resurgence and pride that was hard to see earlier at all. When I started doing all these talks, maybe 10 odd years ago, I was the odd one out saying, why is this guy, what happened to him? But now it's not seen as something adverse, it's seen as something quite common. So again, Tim, I over-answered your questions, but the politics, what's happening is essentially it's democracy, and so numbers are the way they are. And the Modi government is generally very left-leaning in its policies, but its voter base wants him to do more for the Hindu population, for sure. And that's what he's dealing with right now. Maintains great relationships with all the neighboring countries, so it's all good. In fact, if you look at Indian geopolitics as well, there's a strong sense of independence. If you hear the Indian external affairs minister talk, and he's out lecturing like J.D. Vance was lecturing the Europeans. He's also out lecturing the Europeans that look, we have our own priorities and we're not driven to accept your priorities as ours. We have our worldview, and our worldview is one where trade is good, where trade improves relationships within any country. So we are pro-trade, pro-globalization, pro-non-imperialism, and so on. So there's a whole bunch of, and all of that is informed by a deep sense of cultural continuity and a connection with the past. If you look at India and China, for example, right? India and China today have reasons to go to war because in China is a rising power, India is a soon to be rising power. They should be going to war. But now we have deep connections with China. China has deep respect for India historically. And we're going back to that and saying, all right, why don't we just talk it out? Why don't we are not obliged to think the Western countries. And so they're trying to find out ways to engage. I don't know if India will ever work that out, but the point is that the approach is to use non-Western frameworks to look at the world. And therefore, when you look at how Western press might represent Modi, you're going to see a lot of pillorying and caricature because that's a sort of allergic reaction to whatever he's doing because he's not under control. He's not speaking our language. But there's a lot more to it, and I'd urge you to read other sources for that.
Gaurav, I have a question.
Hey, Nikhil.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for staying up late over there. You mentioned the concept of karmic accounting, right? The checks and balances and all of that we govern ourselves by, right? Can you explain how does that influence or inform us as chaplains when we would be dealing with people who might be in pain? And we do know, certainly we know that we're not afraid of death, but that's most people, 90% of people don't think that way there when they're going through things. And we're not just talking about end of life, we're talking about day-to-day issues of pain and suffering. And so how do you utilize the concept of karma in that sort of conversation if you were dealing with a Hindu client?
Sure, yeah, thanks.
Or someone from that background.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Nikhil. So I'll frame the question and then I'll try to answer it. So the karma, by the way, is, while it's a Hindu and Buddhist concept, and you've probably also heard it from Buddhist schools of thought as well. But in general, there was a Pew research that was carried out in India a few years ago. And to no one's surprise, even if you're Muslim or Christian in India, you believe in both karma and reincarnation. That's just the way the culture is. So it's not just a uniquely Hindu or Buddhist or Jain belief. It's just people generally believe that. And why it is that, I'll give you that so that I explain the logical reason for it. And then, Nikhil, I'll answer your question, I promise. A lot of our conditions of life, who we are and the kind of life that we're leading, is a result of factors beyond our control. How tall we're going to be, how good looking we're going to be, how affluent our families are, what kind of cultures we're born into, what kind of resources we have access to, they're determined at birth, right? We didn't choose those. And so if the 90% of the facts of life are driven by an entirely random act, because I didn't choose it, then the question is, what the heck are we trying to do optimizing in the remaining 10% of whatever is within our control? Everything is random. So then there's a school of thought in the Hindu tradition, which is, they're the Epicurean style, basically eat, drink, and be merry, because what the heck, who cares? So the famous adage goes that you should take a loan and eat and drink with it, because who the heck cares? You shouldn't have to return it, just die, right? So that's one school of thought. But clearly, that's a very random, unorganized, and unbelievable set of circumstances where a majority of my life is driven by some sort of random act. And because we believe in reincarnation, it solves a whole bunch of problems. We can say there's more time to sort things out, to unkink this kink in fortune. And so now, when you look at karma, karma is that system by which checks and balances are maintained. This universe works on karma, and what you put out comes back, right? And comes back over multiple different forms and different ways and different lives and so on. And so some of what's happening to you is just accumulated karma from previous momentum, and some of which is stuff that you've done in this life and so on. Now, in terms of when you're looking at a patient and you're addressing them, the fact that this is so deeply ingrained, You don't need to mention it, but they're wired to think in terms of karma. What is it that's available to them at this time is probably an important question. And what's available tend to be three things. This is from one of the other Upanishads. One is, how do you get good karma? You can do good deeds. You could reduce the excess of consumption, excess of wastage, excess of anything. And that propensity to excess, if you control that, that's dhammyata, Nikhil, for you. So dhammyata is suppressing the tendency to excess, is a good way to actually cut back on your karmic balance, or at least bring it back under control. So that's one. Two is kindness. So that's his dayadvam. And that is kindness to other people. And doesn't need to be large acts of kindness, but any kind of act of kindness. Because of the power we wield, we're in a Western society, we can be kind to animals, we can be kind to people, we can be kind to anyone whose lives touch us. And the third is through charity, which is datta, which is charity. So through controlling our propensity for spending or for excess, through kindness and through charity, we're able to now do things that are more in line with how the universe works. So that's generally what you would do to improve your karmic balance in that sense. The other thing you'd do is you'd surrender yourself. So a lot of the work is simply devotional surrender, because the way the calculus of Hindu thought works, you don't owe anyone anything if you don't exist. Because again, Epicurean philosophy. So how do you not exist? Because clearly, if you die, you're going to be born again. So how does that work? You get out of the cycle. How do you get out of the cycle? Is you lose yourself in devotional fervor. You lose yourself, your sense of self completely just dissolves into the supreme, and you're just floating in this ocean of bliss. And that's one way to also improve your karmic balance, is to lose yourself completely. And so it's devotional surrender. And so devotional practices could be chanting, visiting a temple, or just doing good deeds through your actions. So that's karma yoga. And so those are all things that you might do as well. Nikhil, thank you for that question, though.
No, thank you for the answer. But in effect, you're talking about good works, love, and compassion.
Yeah, it's the same
If you put
formula.
it in Western
Yeah.
Christian
It's not alike.
terminology, but that helps also then reduce the karmic effect that we're living through today.
Yes.
And if the goal of life is liberation from the cycles, not to come back.
Yes.
It is not to think about next time we come back, I'll be in a better position. The
Yeah,
goal
or
is to
you
get
owe
out
me
of it
one
now.
for next time. All right. None of that. We don't want to be owed one. We just don't want to like overdo any of these things. We want to be done with this thing.
Who would want to come back to this world as it is right now? Right?
I know,
That's it.
yeah. This world
Few
for sure.
people.
Yeah. Here. Any questions or other things reflecting on the talk? And then I have a whole bunch of other stuff to show you.
One quick follow-up to Nikhil's question is just, I noticed you said surrender in the devotional sense, but you didn't mention the meditative sense of getting transcendence that way. And is that sort of a lower kind of aspect of the way the religions practice these days, or does it just vary?
No, that's a very interesting and very nuanced and layered question, Dana. In the Hindu yoga system, there's several ways to attain union with God, and they're intertwined. I don't have hair, but if I did and I wore them long, I would braid them. And so you would think of them as being braided. And so karma yoga is through action. And the English word for the karma yoga, you could write that down, is simply enthusiasm. Why? Because enthusiasm literally means to be filled with God. Tu is thou, which is God. Enthusiasm literally means to be filled with God. When you're working enthusiastically, your hands are trembling, you're filled with joy juice, that's you're filled with the stuff of God. You are not doing any action. It is God acting through your being. That's karma yoga. So that's Karma Yoga. And then what you're describing is Jnana Yoga, which is the yoga of knowledge and wisdom, where through either philosophical inquiry, through negation of the external world, or through meditative contemplation, or just dhyana itself, you arrive at the same said truth, which is my individuality is very subjectively there, but not quite there. The truth of my being in all cases is that God is, of that you're sure. Your own self, you're pretty sure that you're not there as an individuality. This is just a form that you seem to inhabit. And you can arrive at that through logic, hard, but you can also arrive at that through meditation, like you're describing, like TM or anything. And the third is Bhakti Yoga, the devotional surrender. And generally, the consensus for the folks that I've studied with and read, the consensus is that Bhakti, the devotional surrender, is the last and final step. Because even if, and from my own experience, I can tell you, even if you're one with the universe, what happens at that point? Everything dissolves. Fine, you're still around. And what do you do now? You can't really control the universe. You can't will the water to fly to you. It just doesn't work that way. And so now what you're doing, say, you've got to that state where you've denied the heck out of everything. You just know that there is something. But what do you do with that? You don't really do much with that. And so it's treated as a penultimate step. The ultimate step is to say, whatever it is, I surrender that too. And that, because your heart melts away, not just your head, because your heart melts away, your entire being is now dissolved into this, like I said, this goop of joy juice. And then there is nothing. It's all God. And then that's a good place to be. So in general, the consensus is that Bhakti Yoga is always the last step. And a lot of Hindu schools and this is my personal view, a lot of Hindu schools that I speak with, visit with, and hang out with, they tend to be the very dry, very rational, very logical schools. And I can guarantee that they're not happy at all because I've seen them. They'll read an entire treatise on the Om. There are several treatises on Om, but I've never heard them chant Om once. And my point is, why don't you just chant it? You can write the treatise yourself because the experience itself is being pointed at. But you're not. So because you arrive at the world where you've negated the world, you're saying, okay, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true, but there must be something that's true. Even if you arrive at it, it does not give you a sense of joyful surrender. You're like Atlas, you're wearing the weight of the world on your shoulders. And then what's with that? And so my own personal opinion is that those schools are also they're not complete. But I run a school for Karma Yoga, so I can speak for myself. The way we look at it is Karma Yoga is not, it's braided together. And so you have to have and so a great analogy, if you heard of Vivekananda, so his guru gave this amazing analogy. There's a sweet that they make with rice and sugar and milk. And it's very sweet, it's very tasty. And he used to like it. He was a foodie, it turns out. And he said that you need the robustness of rice, which comes from Karma Yoga, which is all action. You need the clarity of milk, which comes from all the wisdom and meditation and so on. So you need the rice and the milk, but you need the sweetness of bhakti, devotion, because then the whole package is complete. And so the sweetness, without that sweetness, even the action that is done in a self-love, even if I say, I don't believe in God, I'll do this thing selflessly, but it's also joyless. And what's the point of that? And so the way I'd recommend Karma Yoga is surrender yourself and then let the work flow, and it'll be filled with amazing miracles and joy. What's not to like?
What's not to like? That's amazing. Yeah. And I want to thank you also for the presentation, because I feel like you helped us feel the sort of the richness and the joy of it, which doesn't come through in the sort of the readings. So thank you.
Sure. And that's why it's somewhat provocative. I just want you to be overwhelmed by the images, because I want you to feel that this isn't, it's a very lived tradition. It isn't a dead taxidermy museum tradition that this is how these guys were. No, it's a very vibrantly living tradition, and it's important to feel the chaos somewhat to understand what's going on in these people's mind. So, more questions?
Do the Hindus have anything like the Buddhists, the Bodhisattva vow to, as not to seek freedom, but to actually purposely come back in service of others?
Yeah, so Bodhisattva vows I'm sure everyone knows it, but I'll just repeat them for my own benefit, is simply the vow that you could surrender and go away because you're a Bodhisattva, you're an enlightened being, but you choose to stay back because who else is going to train everybody else? And so you take a vow to come back and so on. In the Hindu tradition, the Buddhism and Hinduism are somewhat analogous. So Alan Watts, of course, famously said that Buddhism is Hinduism packaged for export. And so that's Alan Watts, not me. But so it's very analogous, but there is not, in my reckoning, not much of a direct link between the Bodhisattva vow and anything that I've seen in the Hindu tradition. There are saints and sages, of course, that are out here whose mission is spreading. And so I like to think that it's a little different. And if you'll excuse me, if you pardon me, I'll tell you a story. And then I'll try to answer your question if that's okay with you. All right, this is a story not about Hindus, but about songbirds. Songbirds sing songs, of course, and they get to know their own kind from the songs that they sing, because that's how they find their mates. They sing and they sing their heart out, and they find their mate, and they sing the song. And so the children, in order, of course, to get busy with finding their mates, got to learn the song from their parents, because otherwise, no mate for you, my friend. And you can do your song, but see you later. And that's the end of that line. And so the songbirds learn the song from their parents and inherit it. And so over hundreds of thousands of generations, the same song would be played out. And how we know that is that UC Berkeley ran a research in the Rift Valley in Africa, where mountains have been cleaving apart. And what might have been one ecosystem over 1 million years is now two different ecosystems. And now the songbirds on those mountains can no longer breed together. They're just completely different species over time. But guess what? They're singing the same song because the songs have transmitted over generation. And so now the question is the following: is the songbird singing the song, or is the song traveling through time by means of the songbird? And when I heard the story, this is one of those NPR deals, it just broke me completely, because I realized that the songbird is essentially a means for the song to travel over time. And then you apply that recursively, because that's what Hindus do. They apply everything to themselves. So my question was, okay, so then what's going on with me? What's my reality? And then I realized that my reality is shaped by a song, and that this form is singing. It isn't my song. It turns out I've in my life met many people that have the same exact dream. We didn't coordinate our ideas. We didn't read up from a book. We didn't get visited by an angel or a guru. This is just the song that is our song. That's what we're doing. And then once I realized that's my song, then I realized that this particular songbird is just a means for the song to travel. That's all I have to do as a good songbird, is to live my song. That's the reason I'm up at midnight doing this class, because it's my song. So no Bodhisattva vows for you, to answer your question. Kathleen, yes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gaurav, especially for staying up so late. Since we're on the topic of animals, I had a question about some of the animal gods like Hanuman and God, I'm blanking, the elephant.
Yeah,
one,
Ganesha.
Ganesha, of course, yeah. And I like to listen on Spotify to Kirtan music. I really love it. I started in the pandemic, and it's been such a support for me. And I have also gone once and done some chanting or singing, more like singing really, which I put in the Bhakti practice category. And yeah, could you talk a little bit about the Ganesha and Hanuman and sort of how those fit in your cosmology and the practices and so on?
Sure. Yeah. So Hindu deities, it's a very complex, and thank you for that question, Kathy. So a very complex and very interesting combination of what's going on. Hanuman, of course, is famously, he is called the monkey god. He seems to take the form of a monkey, but human-like proportions, but also extra large and powerful and very muscular and so on. So he epitomizes all the three yogas that I described. He's sitting with his musical instrument, chanting Ram Nam. He's a devotee, but he's very strong and he's always engaged in action and overdoes actions to begin with. And so he's obviously a karma yogi, but he's also very wise. So he's also a wisdom yogi, right? So he's all three in one form. And so his form is very dear to all of us. He's also one of the 7 immortals. So he's still around. If you sing so rumor has it, if you're singing Ram Kirtans anywhere, then he's sitting there. He's right there because he likes to chant along. And so he is very dear to us. Now, whether he was actually a monkey or it's a memory of a time when other human species and humans were together, it's hard to say. I'm not going to impose modern sensibilities on the past, but his form does appear in modern telling as a monkey form, for sure. But very muscular, very human-like in his sort of posture and demeanor. He's very popular in the Kirtan circles, of course. And Ganesha, of course. So Ganesha is Shiva's son. Now Ganesha is elephant-headed. That's a backstory. And he is called the remover of obstacles. But the backstory is that he got his elephant head himself because he was an obstacle. It turns out that Shiva is a meditator. He always likes to meditate. So he's out meditating, doing his business, and his mother and his wife is at home, and she's got this sort of a mud wrap or some sort of wrap, sandalwood wrap on her body, and then so she's taking it off, and it gathers in a clump, and she makes a little boy out of it. And so here's a living boy that she's made. He's all fragrant and sweet. And she says, okay, I'm going in to take a shower, so please guard the door, will you? And so this young boy is guarding the door that she's just made, and she's inside taking a shower. And the Shiva, meanwhile, returns. And he wants access to his own house. Naturally, it's his home. And this boy says, no, you may not go. And so Shiva says, what is this young thing? What does this guy want? He's stopping me from going into my own house. So he says, no. So Shiva gets angry. He has a third eye. He nukes this young boy completely. He just chops his head off. And then he enters, and then his wife Parvati inquires what happened. And there was this thing outside, and I just killed him. And then she gets really mad because obviously it's her son, and she's really completely upset about the whole episode. And so now Shiva has to make up and do something about it. So he has to find a new head. And he has to, previous head has been incinerated, so that's not going to be very useful. So he has to find a new head. So he finds a new head in the form of an elephant, and he has to get an elephant head, and that's what he's wearing. So now he's seen as an elephant-headed god, big pot belly, but he rides a little mouse. All the Indian deities tend to have a ride, which is an interesting, so Shiva rides a bull. The goddess rides a lion because, of course, she's got all the arms and ammunition. She's a Second Amendment fan, so she's got all the ammo, and she's riding a lion. And then who else? And then, of course, Vishnu's riding a golden eagle, so very American ride there. And then Murugan is riding a peacock. So there's all the gods and goddesses. They always have an interesting ride. And in this case, Ganesha, large, pot-bellied, elephant-headed, he's riding a little mouse, which, of course, those of us that use computers, we think we know what's going on with the mouse. So Ganesha is a remover of obstacles. So as I was saying, the reason a lot of Hindu prayers begin with a reference to him is because he is helping us get over and around obstacles. He will prevent obstacles from coming in the way of this particular gathering. And so that's why Ganesha is invoked in Hindu prayers in general. In terms of animal or animal forms used being in the Hindu tradition, there are more. So Garuda, interestingly, and by the way, they're all mnemonics, incidentally. So you're right, Aaron. Okay, there you go. Here, there you go, Ganesha. That's a good book. Okay, the other thing you should know about animal forms in the Hindu tradition is there are more. There is a Vishnu himself in his previous, he keeps coming to earth because it turns out we keep getting into trouble, and he has to come down and bail us out. And so one of the previous times he came in the form of a wild boar, like a pig, but with snout, with the what's this thing called, the wild boar. You know what a boar is anyway. So he comes in that form. He has two horns, and this is when I'm guessing global warming was all the rage. So all the islands had submerged. So the story is that Earth had submerged into the ocean, and he comes in, and then he has to lift Earth up on his two horns and out. And that's how he's shown in that Varaha form, in a wild boar form. There are other forms. My own last name, for example, it comes from either a horse or the sun, and you have to figure out which one. It's hard to say. These were sun worshippers, my ancestors. But so you could say horse or sun, and again, that's my name. There are some Indian people with the last name Singh, which is lion, and and there are people with last name Meena, which is fish. So a lot of animal imagery goes around in the Hindu tradition because it's a very grounded, rooted to the earth tradition. It's very connected to the earth. So very deep connection with rivers and animals and birds and so on. So I've already told you about the eagle. There are stories with peacocks. There are stories with parrots, a whole bunch of interesting crane. There's a very fun crane story that's out there. So there's a lot of interesting stories that exist in the Hindu tradition, all rooted to the earth, all rooted to things that you could see and feel, and everything is mystical and magical in that sense.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was really fun to hear about. And am I correct in understanding that, like, God, my brain's not working this morning. Kirtan music is like a bhakti practice.
It's a very core bhakti practice. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And which kirtans are you listening to? I'm just on a side note.
Oh God, I just put on Kirtan music on Spotify.
Oh, that's what it's called. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you should look up Krishna Das. I'm sure you've looked up Krishna Das. He's awesome. And you're in Berkeley, so he does his concerts twice a year at the UU in San Francisco. Great. And then Jahnavi Harrison is amazing. She did a concert at the UU that was beautiful. No, it wasn't the UU, in fact. It was a different church in San Francisco on top of Nob Hill. Beautiful. Just amazing performance. She was great.
Yeah. It's really just...
yeah. So the Kirtan practice, for everybody else following or not following along, Kirtan practice is devotional sing-along. And usually they're chant along. So they're not just a person singing, but it's actually you chant along. And they're the practices that, if you're invested in the backstory, they're even more interesting because, there's a lot of juice you can get out of that. But the project is to melt the heart. And then you will see people that are trembling with joy, that have tears running down their eyes, and they're just dancing their heart out, because that's what the project is. You're going to completely lose all sense of being an individuality, having the problems or bearing the weight of the world, everything just disappears with those tears, everything melts away. These are happy tears, and that's the important part. So I like to think of, because I'm a San Francisco nerd, a Bay Area nerd, I like to think of it as as just technology for the heart. It's just a way to cultivate and melt the heart. And that's very important, because how else could you do it? Should we take a 5-minute break? If there are questions, I take them. Otherwise, we take a break.
Can you just repeat the name of the woman, Kirtan?
Oh,
singer?
Jahnavi, I'll type her name out. She's
Okay.
Jahnavi Harrison. So she's okay. Okay, the heck, I've just written to somebody else. Let me just write to you. 1 second. What am I?
Can you type out the man's
I'm
name
typing
also?
it up here. Sorry, I'm just trying to get. Okay, there you go, Jahnavi Harrison. And then, if you like, look up Mari Das. This was a Grammy. Mari Das is a guy, and he's got this. He's got Karma. He's got 2 albums. I like his first album, Grammy nominated. It's a very American album. Let me see. It's Bhakti. Hold on, I'll look at my Spotify. Mari Das. Of course, this is this is Bhakti Without Borders, of course. And that's the album that I really like. There's Mantra Americana, which I don't like. But Johnny May Harrison is beautiful. She sings amazing, and her work is great. Krishna Das is great, of course. And then other Kirtankars, let's see who else I like. You're gonna, oh yeah, Gauravani. So if you look up Hanuman, the Hanuman is great. Gauravani is the lead singer there. Beautiful. And then there's, of course, Jai Uttal. Again, these are all Western people. Jai Uttal and Gauravani. These are all amazing kirtans, and I love each one of them. That's just something to think about. If you like long drives, some of you are Nikhil, you're in Florida. I bet you like to drive long distances. This is a great accompaniment. You don't need to know the lyrics, because the lyrics are not complicated. It's just the same thing being said over and over again. But sing along, and you'll feel it.
Yeah.
You feel a softening of the heart. You'll feel a melting of the heart. You'll feel that everything just dissolves. And then
Well, I equate it to something that I just learned through the course of Chi, which was about shamanism, which I had not been exposed to. But having lived the tradition of Sanatana Dharma myself, grew up in a Bhakti yoga tradition first, and now come more to the knowledge side, I can certainly relate to the need of it being braided. Because if you braid the 3 traditions, the beauty comes out through the kirtans. But if you do devotion without the knowledge, sometimes it doesn't connect. You don't really know why we're doing it. But now, when you do these kirtans, which are repetitive singing of basically God's names, as it builds and builds, you get to a point of almost ecstasy, because you understand what's happening within you.
Yeah.
I just want to share that, being a practitioner myself, that it does become beautiful once you are involved in this pathway. Immersed, I should say.
Yeah. All right, so we take a 5-minute break, and then we come back, and then we have an hour together. All right, see you in 5 minutes. All right, we're going to be coming back on, so whenever you're ready. All right, hi, and welcome back. We'll give everybody else a few more seconds to come in. At this point, we have about an hour to go together, and I'd like to ask you, I have several ways we can approach it. I could talk to you about Hindu approaches to spiritual care and how we're looking at it from the Hindu Spiritual Care Institute. I could talk to you more about Hindu beliefs and what makes us a whole bunch of other interesting stuff, similar to what we just did. Or I could talk to you about all the cool technologies we're building and how you might be, you know, just it's interesting, cool technologies that I can show you. So depends on what you want. Obviously, this is the spiritual traditions course, so I suspect technology is not going to be top of your mind. What would you like to hear? Amy, yes.
Just a question on the technologies. What do you mean? Can you give an example?
Sure. Okay. I'll bite. The thing is, with spiritual care, the challenge we run into is so the challenge we run into in spiritual care is physical presence. If you look at the work that chaplains are doing, if you're employed at a hospital, you're meeting patients that are at the hospital and not in things that are quick turnaround type deals, right? And so you're meeting a very small fraction of the healthcare recipients. You're meeting them in a very specific circumstances. So your care is limited in space and time, right? Because you're only meeting them at the hospital and you're meeting them in a particular time frame. But the vast majority of needs that people have, 95, 98% of their time, they're not at the hospital. Yeah, if you look at cancer, for example, it's all outpatient work, right? They might come in, but they'll go away. You'll never get to see them. And the challenge that we run into with chaplaincy is generally outreach. How do you reach out to people? And then outreach means you become a spiritual director, you have your own practice, and then you reach people. But I talked with my good friend Anil Mulares at Sifu at Spiritual Directors International. He's the executive director there, and his own practice is now majority online because spiritual direction, again, you just have to meet people, and most of the people he's just meeting online like this. And so the technology that we've built together is quite interesting. You give out QR cards with QR codes on it at the hospital, and whoever needs to, whether it's a chaplain or a family, they need to talk to someone, they can take the cards back, they scan the QR code, they tell us who they are and what they want, and we'll call them and then schedule a call with someone from around the world that speaks their language, understands their context, and is able to help them with whatever that they need help with. And so the scheduling system, it's all anonymous. So your phone number as a patient does not go to anyone. It just stays in the system. The provider also, like you are going to be providing, your phone number does not go to anyone. You're given a link, you get a video link, you press the video link, boom, you're looking at a video and you're talking to people, you have the conversation, it's done. And then it'll take feedback from both parties. So the whole technology is built around giving everyone a seamless experience without having to deal with multiple technologies. Right now, for example, if you run your own practice, you need to schedule on some sort of text messaging or email. then you send them a Zoom link. Then you'll have some sort of a ticket tracking or a case tracking or a note-taking system. You're dealing with 5 or 6 systems at this point already, scheduling system as well. And what we've done is we've built one system. It's all seamless. So no one needs to do any extra work. And so we built that technology for our own use, which is the same as your use, which is providing spiritual care to people. We use that for our learning as well. In fact, I met Rivka a couple of weeks ago, and I showed her that for our own learning, what we're doing is our student to student. So we realized that we're doing a lot of theory lectures. This is our 7th cohort. And so I'm also the dean and the chief technology officer, many hats. The reason I hold both those hats is our problem was that we were training people with all the theory, but none of the confidence, because now they're going to go out and practice until they get confidence, but that's 2 steps. So we said we can't have that. So the way we teach it is we say, okay, here's the theory, but now have a conversation where we'd like you to talk to us as faculty, or we'll set up your own conversation with each other and now role play and see how it feels to receive care and see how it feels to provide care. All of that mediated by the same technology. So you get a link, you press the link, videos pop up, no apps to download, no nothing. It's all nothing to learn. It's all good to go. So that's the technology that we built out. And of course, the reason we did that is to honor the age-old cliche that if you see an Indian guy at a hospital, they're either a doctor or a guru or an outsourcing guy or a technologist. What if all 4 of those were the same organization? So that's what we're doing. We had to honor the full cliche and not just one third of it. All right. So let me talk to you now about Hindu approaches to spiritual care. So the chi, okay, no, it's not associated with chi. I did offer to Rivka that if she wants to use it, we'd be happy to figure out ways to extend it to chi. Yeah. Right now, it's the Hindu Spiritual Care Institute that's using it. All right, so I'm going to share screen again. Hindu approaches to spiritual care is what I want to talk to you about. Let me pull up the presentation before, so I'm not giving you whiplash injury by flipping around back and forth. Okay, here we are. Okay, I'm going to begin with Hindu sort of framing, and then I'll comment. So it's a fragment of a presentation I make elsewhere, so just give me 1 second. And again, feel free to ask me questions. I'm going to be looming large on this video, like, all right, which is right here. Okay, so the thing is, you have to see that. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you about this. Imagine if we were to be displaced and sent to Mars. Mars in India is in Hindi and Sanskrit is called Mangal. Mangal literally means everything is good. Mangal means good, which is, but if we were to be sent to Mars, not everything will be good because Mars has poor atmospheric cover. This is literally a photo of Mars. This is the rover. The problem is it has no atmospheric cover, which means that the temperature goes very wide swings in the temperature every day. So it's unlivable. It's very harsh, and it's not a very pleasant living experience. And that's the problem on Mars. On Earth, on the other hand, look at this. How convenient is this? This is the range of temperatures on Earth. It's a very comfortable lived experience. And the core belief that we have at the Institute is that society is air conditioning for the spiritual self. It is the function of society, of a well-run society, is to insulate the emotional states of its members, to keep us in this comfortable range. The same sun, when not presented with an atmospheric layer, can create wide swings in temperatures. But the same sun is still able to create a very comfortable range of lived experience because we have an atmospheric cover, which is conditioning. Now, the problem that we have in modern society is that we have eroded this cover and we're becoming more Mars. And I'll show you data to prove that. And that's the reason spiritual care is the need of the hour. So that's the reason I thanked you up front. Hindu definition of society is of dharma. Dharma is the system of governance or system that holds the society together. Dharma is that which sustains the society. And so something is that which ensures the well-being and progress of humanity, right? This is dharma. And we clearly feel that we're not in that state, right? And so I'm going to come and show you a bunch of data relating to that. Okay, data that. Okay, now generally what happens with the Western system of society, where spiritual needs are generally, and of course this is over stereotyped, but hey, it's just payback. But it's over stereotyped, but essentially the community bubble is organized around the Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, depending if it's mosque, synagogue, or church. And then in that community bubble, you belong to that congregation, and it's a one-stop shop for all your spiritual care needs. You go there for prayers and sermons and for confidential confessionals or to be ministered to. All of that is closely organized. The Hindu society, however, is the exact opposite. It's not organized religion by any means. It's in fact a community self-organizing religion. And so you don't go to a temple, belong to a temple. You go to every temple because why not? And then your spiritual needs, I'm just going back and forth just to show you, are now unbundled. You go to a temple if you want to go to a temple. But for sermons, you'd have a YouTube guru or someone who's a scripture expert, and you'd listen to them talk. If you need confidential advice, your neighborhood uncle or auntie will be happy to poke their nose in your business, or your astrologer will be able to understand a whole bunch of stuff you're saying and then give you something in response. Or if you need to be ministered to, you go to a guru or an ashram, and then they take care of your spiritual care needs and so on. It's highly unbundled, and the community that you belong to is everyone. It's in the air you breathe, right? Now, what happens when these two societies come together? But before, we realize that we have become a very eroded society. Loneliness is persistent across society, and it's creating physical health impact. If you see the sleep disorders, weight management issues, substance issues, a whole bunch of issues that are directly coming from loneliness. And so clearly, the community bubble that people used to belong to no longer applies. It's wearing off. And now we find ourselves in the age of DIY spirituality. This is my formulation of my sort of diagnosis of where we are right now. The Hindus are on the right side. They come from this sort of unbundled DIY kind of thing. And the Western sort of organized religion is on the left side. We find ourselves, curiously, in the middle, coming from opposite directions, where we can see that everything's been unbundled. Now, personal rituals are their own thing. Instagram is filled with all sorts of people who are teaching you personal rituals. There's YouTube talks all over the place. All sorts of sermons are available. And for spiritual care and for confidential conversation, we would exist. This group that we are would exist. And then, of course, there's a whole industry of cottage industry of gurus, astrologers, therapists, and life coaches that are able to do ministering and so on. And the community bubble is somewhere in all these things, a little bit here and a little bit there. That's what's going on with the world. That's how I read the world, that we are now curiously meeting in the middle. We don't live in India anymore, so we don't have access to this self-organized group that we used to. And the world at large has generally fragmented, and so organized religion is coming down. So if you see the rise of nuns and so on, not in this presentation. Hey, hold on, I have that presentation as well. I can look it up. And I see murmuring on the chat. So I'm going to read something and see what's going on here. Chat. Okay, that's the group. Okay, that's a different thing. Okay. Anyway, the point is we meet ourselves in the middle. So the work you're doing is extremely critical, because essentially it's going to serve as connection to society. That's the reason when you look at Hindu spiritual care and the way we're looking at it, if you look at modern life is all in this loneliness band. The entire life apartment where everything is apart from everybody else. It's all an individual life without support and sharing. And boy, is that a terrible life. It's a very poor life experience, because even if you became extremely wealthy, won a whatever, a $600 million lottery, and you have no one to share with your happiness, then that happiness too is very short-lived. So good and bad, if there's no one to share with, then it's a very terrible experience. It's like living on Mars. But there's the whole spectrum of life issues that you need to deal with, which is hard to deal with in this loneliness band. All sorts of stuff going on in your career, with parenting, with disputes, aging, whole bunch of life issues that you have to deal with. But wouldn't it help to have support? All right. And that is, of course, when you look at Hindu view in general, the family is important, obviously. The family and friends and the extended network are extremely important, because we're there for every one of these things. And then celebration. So you could tell that this is a very celebratory culture. And so a lot of celebrations from before birth to long after death. There's a series of things you need to do. There, you're marking time, both in terms of personal aging, but also calendar time and Jupiter time and Saturn time, a whole bunch of time that you're marking. Everything's a celebration. We juxtapose everything together, and now we have a new way of looking at life, which is a life rich in tradition, support, and sharing. Wouldn't it be great to have friends and family and the extended network participating with us on all of these, all sorts of good and bad things in life? Right? Juxtapose on that also the 4 stages of life. This is important. There's a very interesting Atlantic article, the Atlantic magazine article by Arthur C. Brooks, which was fun. I look it up for you if you need to. But essentially, there are 4 stages of life in the Hindu tradition. This is important because brahmacharya is when you're a student and you're conserving your energy, your sexual energy and otherwise, and focusing on studies. And then all hell breaks loose, you're now married and you're now going to have kids. This is the grihastha life. This is the married and working life. This is when you pay your taxes, quite literally in this case, because obviously you're not paying taxes as a student. This is how you bear the burden of your family, but also society. And then vanaprastha is somewhere in post-middle age, where you're now what's called vanaprastha, means heading to the forest. You haven't gone to the forest yet, but you're looking wistfully at the forest and thinking, maybe I should consider going to the forest because I'm done with society. And then sannyasa is when you're done with all of that. You're like, whatever, I'm just going to just live the rest of my life out and focus on my spiritual development and so on. Now, this is the 4 traditional life stages in the Hindu tradition. You don't necessarily need to go through 1 through 4. Your mileage may vary, but this is 4 that are generally recognized. Now, why is this important? Because now we go through life stages and phases and recognize and honor them. The reason I mentioned the Arthur Brooks article was, he says a lot of the problems that people seem to have, the career highs leading to lifetime lows, is that we seem to find ourselves in this life stage pretending to be in this life stage. Essentially, we haven't acknowledged the fact that it's kind of time to start withdrawing from the society. It's all right. We don't need to have an overactive sexual life and overactive social life. It's all good. It's all good. You've seen everything. It's all right. Move on to the next thing. Because we hanker for all those amazing things that we had earlier, we are now unhappy because we can't have it. And now all sorts of medication is available to take our money. So that's his sort of his readout, is that a lot of our ills are simply we just don't know these stages. And if we did, we would probably be happier. Okay, so now we have the full spectrum of life. And this is generally how Hindus would view life in general. What we're doing with our work on chaplaincy is right here. You too fall into this band where we're saying that you're here. You're not family, but you're close to family. You're part of what society exists for. When they need to talk to someone about any of these issues, you're right there. You're there for them. and you're able to have those conversations because you're essentially holding a compassionate presence, a non-judgmental, non-advisory, just presence. That's what you're doing. And then anyone in this state, they're not necessarily looking for answers. They're just looking for compassion and support and just a person with whom they could reason out their life. And then you're helping them deal with their life's ups and downs as they come. And that's what your job. We think that the counselors and chaplains, that's their job of recreating this sense of community that has been evaporated. And so when we teach our course, anyway, this is not relevant, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip over. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we are doing. I'm going to skip over all of this stuff. It's good stuff, but not needed. Okay, the other final thing I want to say here is that the Hindu tradition is a vast, verdant, and fruitful tradition, which is to say that where it's a lot of collective memories that have been codified into a lived and living tradition. The objective of this tradition is to help us live fully, more deeply, more richly. It isn't to control. This isn't a opiate of the masses deal. It's it's designed in a way that helps us deal with the nature that we find, with life as we find it. And so all these things you will find quite interesting because they've all infiltrated the Western psyche. Every word that you're seeing on the screen, you already know those. And that's because piecemeal Hinduism has already found its way into America. And that is the interesting thing. Another factoid, let me see if I can find it. Okay, factoid. Okay, I'm going to find a fun factoid because why not? By the way, this is all the loneliness work. Okay, hold on. That's not what I wanted to show you. No. Sorry, now we're going through dirty linen situation. Hold on. Let me find the actual presentation. Sorry, we will find it. Otherwise, I just bore the heck out of you. Open. No. Okay, just give me a sec. I know what I'm looking for. This is my go-to presentation. You'll see Chi right here because, of course, this is the presentation I use all the time. I'm going to look for a lot of the piecemeal Hinduism. And you complain when you see the actual slide because you'll realize I did all this to show you a piece of sliced bread. But the point I wanted to come to is that you already know this stuff because you piecemeal the heck out of it. You know what karma is, you know what nirvana is, you know what a pundit is, the guy who shows up on TV. And 60% of Americans now choose to be cremated. Now, here's the deal. If there was the resting in peace situation that people say, then the body is important and you want to bury it deep and well. But now 60% people are cremating their body, which means they're practically already Hindu in the sense that the connection to this body is severed, and you would not say rest in peace because there's no body to rest anymore. You're going to say Om Shanti and may you travel in peace, which is the thing that Hindus say. And so the Hindu tradition in general tends to value all of these things. So anyway, the reason I'm saying all of this is you already know a lot of Hinduism. None of this is alien to you. You've already heard of reincarnation. You already know vegetarianism and all this interest in eco spirituality. Hindus are not new to this because eco spirituality, we actually, nature is our goddess. We think of Mother Goddess as the mother in whose womb we live. And so there's a lot of respect for nature. River is a goddess, nature is a goddess. We have a lot of eco spirituality deep in the psyche of the Hindu tradition. What I want to say is, while I opened with something exotic, Indiana Jonesy and its exoticness, you'll realize that a lot of what Hinduism represents is actually modern American religion already. If you look at modern American transcendentalists, our friends Emerson and Thoreau, they are deeply influenced by the Hindu readings that they were doing at the time. Thoreau's lecture on self-reliance, famously, is directly quoting the Gita that he's been reading at the time. And likewise, our friend, that's Emerson, sorry, and Thoreau, of course, carries of the 10 books he carries with him to Walden Pond, carries the Gita, and deeply influenced many people, including, this is a fun talk, but Tolstoy and Nietzsche, who are reading him. And then who's reading Tolstoy is this Indian lawyer in South Africa, later to become Mahatma Gandhi. Who's reading him is this Black activist, MLK Jr. And so you can see that American transcendentalism has ricocheted all around the world, and all of that you can trace back that transcendental belief. You can trace direct lines into Hinduism. So I'd like to say that modern American religion is very close to Hinduism, whether you know it or not. If you look at Hollywood, a lot of the movies that are being made now, Avatar itself is a Sanskrit word to begin with, but a lot of, if you read The Matrix or watch The Matrix, a lot of Hindu ideas have now seeped into public consciousness. And so the alienness that I opened the conversation with is actually not, a lot of our ideas are now your ideas around people that believe that. Karma, reincarnation, cremation, vegetarianism, eco-spirituality, yoga. What else? Did I cover vegetarianism? You're already having the turmeric latte at the Starbucks, so there's that. So all these things, they're all, you can trace a direct line to Hindu ideas. So it's not exotic. It's just stuff that has been piecemealed into different places, but now there's a one-stop shop. So there's just that. Okay, Arthur C. Brooks article, let me Google the heck out of How to Build a Happy Life series is already great, but I will find you, Arthur Brooks, Ashrama. I'll find you the exact article. Hunt for Happiness. No, I think his thing was yeah, you may have peaked. The work peak is earlier than you think. I found the article. I will send it to you right here as we speak. Now, in this fun article, it's a very fun, he's an amazing writer. But what he says is, he finds this thing that he's peaked. He's left his last job. He's going around the world, eat, pray, love style, and naturally, you got to go to India. He goes to India, meets a guru, of course, cliche. And the guru says, you're looking in the wrong places. And that's how he gets his sort of insight that, look, it's different stages for different parts of life. I'm trying to do a 20-something thing at 50-something. Maybe I should move on. Maybe I should accept myself for who I am and enjoy this station of life. And so that's the article I've sent over. Hey, Shivani, welcome back. All right, so that's the long arc. Now we have open Q&A time. This is all the good stuff. I have more to show, trust me, but I don't want to bore you because you have a Sunday filled with more presentations. So I'm now going to ask you to ask me questions.
I have a question. I'm looking back at my notes and I think I wrote something down wrong. When you were talking about the 3 braided yogas and where one is compared to the rice and the second is clarity and the third is the sweetness. The first yoga you mentioned was called, what was it called? I know you said it was enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's 2 words that you already know, but it's a completely different meaning. It's karma yoga. Karma, again.
Karma yoga. Yeah. Okay.
So 2 words you know, but they're not. It actually it doesn't combine into the thing you might think of it to be. It's not karma in you. Karma yoga has a completely different. So karma yoga is selfless service. So it's essentially enthusiasm is the sort of the analog word for that.
Right.
But so that's karma yoga, and so the clarity is milk. And by the milk is a very famous Indian Hindu metaphor for clarity. And so there's a very fun verse by 16th century poet, a Muslim of Hindu sort of philosophical thing. And he says that a good guru is the crane and the swan, both are white-colored birds that live in the water, right? The crane and the swan. But the crane stands on one leg. that he's like doing a yoga posture. So he seems a little more pious, to be honest. The swan, on the other hand, he's got his Mrs. Swan and he's doing his Mrs. Swan trumpet things or whatever. So he says both are in the water. They're both white-colored birds in the water, but only one bird can tell the difference between milk and water. So the belief in the Hindu society at that time, and is that the swan can drink milk and water and keep the milk and just let out the water, so it can separate the milk and water. The crane, on the other hand, is seen as a fake sort of guru who can't tell the difference, between material and non-material. And so milk, so I'm just trying to answer your question, Nancy, milk is seen as a symbol of purity, of wisdom. And in fact, Gita is one of our sacred scriptures. And so Gita itself is presented as the milk of the Upanishad cows. So Upanishads are, so the verse I chanted at the beginning was from the Upanishads, which are several thousands of years old. And these are scripture, Indian scripture inside, that they're embedded inside other books and so on. Those are called cows, as in those cows, you milk them, and then the milk that comes out is the Gita. Essentially, the essence, the sweet, nutritious essence of the scriptures is the Gita. And so that's how milk is revered in the Hindu tradition. And of course, Krishna himself is a cowboy of the original variety. He's a cowherd in his business, his family business is herding cows and so on. You'd appreciate that the cow and milk thing goes deeply in the Hindu tradition.
Thank you.
So milk represents the clarity of wisdom, and rice represents the robustness of karma yoga, of action. And of course, the sweetness is bhakti. So.
I just wondered if you had any sort of last kind of tips we might want to keep in mind when working with Hindu clients in particular, that you think sensitivities we should have or approaches that might be particularly helpful.
Yeah. All right. So
thank you so much. This is great. And thank you for staying up so late.
No, it's all good. So again, it's my song, so it's you got to sing it. All right. In terms of when you're meeting Hindu patients, so there's a few things you should be considered about. Families are very, it's a very strong family culture. So the families are going to be very important to deal with. A few things when dealing with Hindu patients in general are, these are stories I've heard other chaplains tell me, so I'm just going to play them out to you, is older patients, people like me, for example, if I have my practice of chanting, but I need to bathe before I chant. And then I can't eat until I do my chanting. And so there's a whole sequence of things that need to happen. And when you're at a hospital, you're not bathing, so you're not going to be chanting, then you don't want to eat. There's a whole bunch. So you need to really understand what their rituals are. And Hindus have a lot of rituals that we've taken on, and that's important to ask. And shoes are no bueno, so we don't like shoes. And so a lot of times you might have little figurines of Hanuman or Ganesha. You don't want to keep them near the shoes. Anything that touches the shoes is unclean. And so there's a fun thing where Indian kids were on Instagram, were complaining that there was this movie that came out, Wicked. If you saw Wicked, there's a particular dance sequence in which someone's walking around just dancing on a table with books on it. And the Indian kids, they watch the movie, which is fine, but then they come home and then they actually touch the books and they just seek their blessings, say, oh my God, what happened? This is terrible. They get a whole bunch of inherited guilt that they have from somebody stepping on books. Feet, not good. Everyone shuddered. Okay, this is good to know, because I thought it was just Indian people complaining. Oh, Shivani, you're saying, okay, we all shuddered. Exactly. So Indian people are like, it's completely triggering for us to have shoes touching books. It's just not something you ever do. So if you leave a book by us, do not leave the book by the feet, because then we're like, can I move the feet, but I'm in the bed, so what do I do here? Leave the book by the head, please. It's all good. If it's a sacred book, you just leave it by the head. It's all right. Now, patients in general, Again, because we're not looking, oh, on the floor, oh my God, yeah, never on the floor. Do not leave books on the floor. No, please. I'm getting, my hands are trembling at this thought, because then how do I deal with this? Please don't write those things, it triggers. So, so the point is, books are so knowledge is very sacred, and then you would never, books, you never do any of that stuff. It's just not. So that's the books thing. When you meet a patient that's approaching end of life, or looking at the whole idea of end of life, you want to wish them well on their onward journey, because essentially the Hindu belief is that as you are at the end, last moment of life, that's the birth that you'll get next. Because essentially, okay, let me just tell you what's happening after death in the Hindu tradition. So the body is in the, whatever is animating the body, anima, of course, is breath. And so whatever breath, when we take out our last breath, the self floats around, and a lot of new near-death experience videos, YouTube is filled with them, non-Indian people. Same thing, which is essentially the spirit sort of floats around for a few days and then goes away to another birth and so on. In the Hindu tradition, you want to minimize the time that they're lingering, because they're essentially in pain. They are trying to get back into the body, which is why we cremate the bodies, because we're like, okay, time to go bye-bye. And because this body is no longer available, bye, see you. And so the way you do that is, when you cremate someone, you actually fracture their skull. And this is where the last tethered link to the body is. They're trying to reanimate the body. They're trying to come back in, because they can't believe this thing is happening to them. And so when you break this, you're like, okay, this is it. No coming back. This body is gone. We're just, we're burning the body. Bye. And then so you're trying to get them to move along, but you also want them to be non-discombobulated, non-confused, not clinging, and non-unhappy. And that's why we say Om Shanti, may there be peace, because we're saying, wish you well on your onward journey. Sadgati praptirastu. Essentially, we're not saying rest in peace, because in the Hindu tradition, and again, we do a lot of education, where we're like, if you say rest in peace, you're saying, okay, stay around as a ghost. Feel free to float around. And that's just not good. Who wants to be floating around as a ghost? Unhappy, hungry, and not able to consume anything or do anything. So what's good with that? So you want to wish them onward journey. So when someone's approaching death, a lot of their concern is that they want a good death. They want to be in a calm, peaceful state of mind. And a lot of times the families need to learn to let go, because if they're in a sort of a ventilator, ICU type situation where there's just like machines, there's a whole bunch of stuff, the body is dead, but you're holding on to it. It's just not a good situation. If they're in a state where they're terminal and they're gone, you should let them go in peace. And a lot of families that I know have done that. They have let their loved one go in peace, because they want them to go in a sense of calmness. Because again, the next birth is determined by your state of mind, so to speak, at the end of this life. So why not give them a leg up on the next life by giving them the peace that they need to choose wisely their next birth? Because otherwise, in a discombobulated state, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and you take the thing that appears to you, and that may not be a great birth. So why waste a birth? So you want them to be in a quiet, calm state of mind. If you have things that they like chanting, let them play it. There are many mantras there's a very common mantra that we have for it's called the mantra of immortality, but quite literally what the mantra says is, like a ripe fruit falls off from the tree, may I be severed from the clutches of death. And so it's saying that when it's time, it'll automatically fall out. There's no need to pull anything. There's no need to force anything. It's just going to be natural. Let it be natural. And if they want verses chanted, that'll bring calmness to them. It'll bring calmness to the family. And generally, there's a whole bunch of rituals and so on, but all of them designed to wish this person an onward journey, and then wish them well. And so the sooner they go, the better it is for them, and so on. So end of life, you do not want to think about eternal hellfire or heaven, because again, even if you do go to the Hindu heaven or whatever that means, it's temporarily, short-lived. You go there and you come back because cyclical nature of everything. So in general, you want to assure them and give them a sense of calm and peace, and it's okay. And then if they're filled with regret, you can just talk about karma and you can say, look, with whatever life or breath you have, just be filled with kindness, just be filled with charity, and it'll be fine. Some good will accrue from, even if you're lying down on the bed, from doing this, and so on. After death, the family has to do a series of rituals. For example, offering water to the ancestors is a thing that you do. And then it's a very ritual thing. You would invite the ancestors and people feel them, see them. Most recently, my mother, we did this ritual. I'm in Delhi. I had the opportunity to be with my mother, and she's a skeptical kind. She's not gullible by any means. And when we were doing this ritual, where we invited the ancestors, she said she could feel my father and my grandfather's presence there because she felt, and on few days, not all of it. The point I'm saying is, it's something that we hold dearly and we feel it. It's not something that we just imagine. And even the skeptical people will be that way. So after death, there's a lot of rituals that'll help closure. Grieving is important, and there's a whole process of grieving in the Hindu tradition, which is, again, you have to grieve. You can't cook at home. You can't. You just have to grieve because that's your job, and do a good job of grieving, because then you'll be able to come out of it and recover and move on to other things in life. And so when you're meeting people that have this sadness around them, then help them with this. And yeah, these might be things that you could say. Is that helpful? Yes. And Shivani, you have your hand up.
Super helpful. Thank you.
I wanted to share that in my experience, a lot of times Indian elders can be very private. And I also think a lot of Hindu, Desi, Indian, depending on who it is, like elders, also haven't really gotten a chance, and this is general, but to share about their own life. And so something that when my Nana passed away, I wasn't there, but my mom was there. And so I sent her a list of questions to ask him. So while he was on his deathbed, my mom asked him, like, what was your favorite time of day? And I asked, who did he love the most? Because I'm...
Of course.
but,
Loaded question.
So many questions. And I found that having questions ready actually helped open things up, because it's not a conversation they would have started themselves. But even having a list of questions to give to family and being like, if you need a starting place, these are some, and very basic questions. What was your favorite time of day? And I learned, I had never known, but my grandpa's favorite time of day was that moment right after he showered and he's getting ready and putting his clothes on. And for when he said he loves himself, he loves who he loves the most, he like couldn't really talk at the time. And so he like just lifted his hand up and he put his hand on his chest. And my mom was like, dang, you love yourself the most? And he was like, yeah. And so that would have never been a conversation we had. But having those questions ahead of time, I think, can be really helpful.
Yeah. Shivani, thank you for sharing. That was a wonderful and beautiful, poignant story. By the way, the pointing to the self, I want to tell you a little story related to that. So Sage Yajnavalkya, there are not too many rock stars in the Hindu tradition of the rock star variety, but Sage Yajnavalkya stands tall amongst rock stars in the Hindu tradition because he's legendary, like superstar guy. Anyway, he's very smart, he's very wise, and at some point in his life, he has two wives, and at some point in his life, he's acquired enough cows, enough gold, and then he's done with it. Yeah, I'm out of here. So he decides he's going to go further into the forests. And so he divides his property equally to both his wives, who he loves dearly. And he says, all right, I'm giving you half here and half to this other one. And All right, hasta la vista. And so one of his wives, so Maitreyi, she stops him right there. She says, wait a second. If you're leaving all this to go somewhere, you must be going to somewhere with something better than what you're giving us. Mister, you can't just leave so quickly. You got to tell me what's the stuff that you're leaving all this for. And then he begins to talk. This is a very famous talk where Yajnavalkya, then he starts to name check things. He says, not for the sake of the gold is the gold dear to us. Not for the sake of the sun is the sun dear to us. And he keeps name checking things. Not for the sake of this and that is the thing dear to us. And then he comes to the truth. Everything is dear for the sake of the self. Everything is dear to us because it is reflective of us. It is ours, and that's why it's dear to us. My son, my gold, my property, my name. And everything is dear for the sake of the self. And so we see ourselves in everything, and that's why those things are dear to us. But when you see yourself in everything, then everything is dear, and then the self is dissolved. And so that's the reason he was letting go of everything, because he no longer held them dear, because he's the master of his own self. He does not need to see it in its reflection. He can see it directly, perceive his self without any medium. And that's why he has acquired vairagya, this dispassion towards worldly goods and wisdom. And so your grandfather was right, Shivani. Not for the sake of the self, for the granddaughter. Is the granddaughter dear to you? It's for the sake of the self. That's why everything is dear to you. It's a very famous dialogue, like Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi, but this is the core of it. And that also goes to these dialogues is another, by the way, I'll tell you, almost a large fraction of the Hindu philosophy is related in story format, in dialogue format, because the world is complex, and how to act in a particular moment depends on the moment. And there, a lot of times people are surprised, how come you don't have your 10 commandments or whatever, 2 commandments or 108 commandments or whatever? We don't, because space, time, and context change infinitely. And so you cannot have a set of handy-dandy set of rules and say, well, these are all the rules you need to have, because it depends on the context. And you need to develop this wisdom, this ability to understand the context in order to determine the right thing to do at the time. And developing character, therefore, becomes the primary responsibility, not adhering to a set of rules that are inherited. And so almost the entire corpus of work is relayed as a series of dialogues, conversations, because they're representing different contexts. I talked to you about the crane. There's a very famous dialogue between a crane and a king. Can you believe it? And it's a famous dialogue because the crane is the guardian of a body of water, like a lake. And this king, this is from the Mahabharata, and he has 4 brothers, all of which, they're all thirsty, so they need the water. One guy is making the water run, doesn't come back. The second guy goes, the third guy goes, the fourth guy goes, and eventually the oldest has to go because his brother's gone. He goes to the same water, and he's about to go to the water, and a crane shows up, and he says, hey, wait a second, I'm the guardian of this space. You need to go past me, otherwise you'll die if you drink the water without me. And like your brothers, and his 4 brothers are all dead. And he says, okay, tell me what you want. So he says, okay, you need to engage me in a debate. The point is, now there's a debate between the crane and the king. And it's a fascinating treatise in philosophy. My favorite statement from that is he says, Kim Ascharyam, what is it that's surprising? This is one of the many questions he's asking. And the king answers, he says, you know what's surprising? You know what's surprising. What's surprising is people die every day. People die every day, and yet we never think about our own death. We never apply the fact of death to our own selves. How is it that we see people dying every day and we never think it's going to be our turn one day? And that is surprising. Again, so much deep philosophy. It's stated in the context of a dialogue between a crane guarding a water body and a king. Because it's such a weird story, it's going to stick in your brain. That's the whole point of it. I like to think that the Indian system is entirely, if you've had mangoes are a fleshy, pulpy fruit with a very large seed inside. And so the pulpy stuff is what is very sweet and pulpy. And so all the external stuff, all the stories, all the dancing, the festivals, the astrology, everything is a container for deep philosophy. So you're going to consume the pulpy fruit and eventually you'll get to the seed. And the seed will germinate inside you as deep philosophical insight and eventually wisdom and dispassion, which is the ultimate goal of the wisdom schools. And so those seeds we ingest by consuming these stories. And eventually they start to make sense. And that's how Hindus put everything together. All right, more questions.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, would it be possible to put the names of these things in the chat?
Yeah, sorry, I covered too much distance.
Sorry.
So Yaksha, Prashna, let me actually find you the right link for this instead of you Googling the heck out of it and then.
Thank you so much.
Let me find Yaksha Prashna. Okay, let me find it. Okay, Yaksha Prashna, question and answer dialogue between Yudhishthira and Baka. Okay, I'll put the. You're on your own after that. I'll send you to the Wikipedia link. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and then unclaimed cremations. Yeah, so cremations. Yeah, okay. So cremations. There's a whole bunch of stats. Okay, what else did I say? What other stories? Okay, Yajnavalkya Maitreyi. Yeah. Okay, Maitreyi Samvad. Okay, Maitreyi. Okay. Okay, Yajnavalkya Maitreyi. By the way, Yajnavalkya is a rock star because famously there's a story of kings who hold debates. It's you promote wisdom by holding debates between scholars, and the winning scholar would get 1,000 cows. In their horns, there'd be a gold coin attached, a lot of money. And so our rock star sage Yajnavalkya walks in with his retinue, his followers, his boys, and he walks in. He's like literally walking in, and he's telling his boys, "All right, so why don't you start herding up the cows? Let me go win this competition." So he's not even had one debate, but he's so confident of his thing that he says, "Okay, start herding up the cows and start taking them home because I'm here to win this debating competition." So total rock star, this man. And anyway, so this is the story of Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. That's the thing. Another set of fun stories is Nachiketa Yam Samvad. So Yama, okay. So Nachiketa is a young boy, and his father, his father is a priest, and he's somewhat miserly. And so they're doing a fire ritual, and you have to donate, and he's donating like the poor cows or like things that are not top-notch material. And so his son sees this, and he says, "This is not good." He says, "So you're giving all your unwanted things to other people. I'm your younger son. This is not the dearest son to his father." He says, "Who are you going to give me to?" And his father gets really mad. He says, "You, I'll give you to death." And then father's mad. But this is a young boy. He takes it to heart. He says, "My father has asked me to go to death." So he goes to death's door and he waits. It's not his time, so he can't talk. Death is not there. Death is out fetching other people. So when the god of death, he comes back 3 days later, he's like, "Why are you here, young man?" He says, "My father told me that he's giving me to death. I'm here. Do what you will." So he says, "It's not your time. But since you're here and I made you wait, why don't I give you a few boons and make a wish and I'll give you what you want?" And he says, "What happens after death?" And so Yama, the god of death, says, "You could ask for any worldly, like riches, take some money, get some kingdom, get some power. Come on. This is not a question I can answer for you. You're too young." And he says, "No, I want to know what happens after death." And so that dialogue is now one of the stories as well, because essentially now Imagine the story, right? Young man, a young kid just going and talking to death. Where else would you hear this? But then again, it's deep philosophy, but it's encased in this amazing stories of a young boy talking to death. So that's the Hindu tradition. It's a very complex, very, very rich, very rewarding, and very entertaining thing. Lots going on. What else can I tell you? We have 10 more minutes. Otherwise, I'll tell you more stories, which is hardly good. And again, I have presentations to talk through, depending on what we want. Questions or comments? Shivani, go ahead.
I'm wondering, as like when we're in our work as chaplains and we are with family, like a Hindu family, but then we notice, I think something I'm really nervous about is like this Hindutva energy and like how to I think it's like how to approach it with compassion instead of, or maybe like how to know, okay, maybe this is too triggering and I'm not the right chaplain for this.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd say that from our experience of running spiritual care and chaplaincy, people just like to be talked with. The Hindu people can generally be very argumentative because everyone's got facts and figures, and they have WhatsApp, which is a source of great news, entertainment, and misinformation. So you don't want to get into that quagmire, which is, I agree with you, Shivani. So what you want to do is just ask them questions about how they are, what they're feeling, what they're up to, what their practices are. Ask them a lot of questions, and they'd be happy to talk. Don't engage with your own opinion, because then you're going to pick up a fight, and that's not anyone's advantage. But ask a lot of questions, and people generally the way you asked with your grandfather, right? With a lot of love and compassion, ask them, "What's your favorite memory?" or "What did you do?" or "What kind of rituals did you have in your family?" and so on, and they'll tell you, and then it'll open up the conversation. You don't need to go with a preset opinion. Just don't engage on those things. And then you don't need to respond to all the WhatsApp thingies that are going on. Okay. As for Nikhil, your thing on the Bhagavad Gita, for those who came in late, there are two major epics in the Hindu tradition. One is Ramayana, and the other is Mahabharata. I can type those out for you, but that's just too much detail. And then okay, now India is known as Bharat. India is called Bharat because essentially it's from the same Mahabharat thing. So the Bharat tribe is what ended up winning over the Battle of 10 Kings way back when, and so that's why India is called Bharat. Mahabharat is a fratricidal battle between two sets of cousins, and it's a highly destructive story eventually, because 4.5 million people minus 10 died in that battle. But it's a battle which is set against the rule of law versus rule for the self. And the people that won, the remaining 10 people, are people that are rule of law people. So I think the society must be operated upon by a rule of law, and not by a desire for self, or whatever, glorification and so on. Anyway, so within that, at the pivotal context, so there's a whole bunch of backstory going on, but there's a battle. It's an 18-day battle, and at the pivotal point in the battle, the ace archer on one side and his horse driver, who happens to be Vishnu incarnate, they are now, the battle has not yet begun, because the rules of battle are that both parties have to engage, and then the battle may begin. So they're both waiting. So armies are arrayed on both sides, and the archer on one side says, okay, he's the lead, like the main guy. He tells his horse driver, which happens to be Vishnu, can you take my cart or whatever, my chariot, to the middle of the battlefield. So they go to the middle of the battlefield, and here he begins to have a panic attack because he sees his family on both sides, and he says, this war makes no sense. There's no mathematical sense in this war. And then so he has the equivalent of he has a panic attack, quite literally. And this is just chapter 1. This entire sequence of conversation is the Bhagavad Gita. It begins with Arjun, the warrior, having a panic attack, and then Krishna leading him through this conversation, showing him a grander vision of reality, and ultimately ending with him giving agency back to Arjun, not telling him, thou shalt engage in war, because what's the point? He says, you have to do what you feel right. And that entire sequence, that 700 verse conversation, is called the Bhagavad Gita. It plays a pivotal role because, like I said previously in an offhand way, it's the milk of the Upanishad cows. You can see verses from the Upanishads directly flowing into this. And so it's the apex of Hindu philosophy, but it's placed in the middle of a battlefield. When I teach the Gita class, I make this distinction up front. There is sanctuary philosophy where you could go to a nice mountain retreat, which is safe and secure, and we could talk philosophy all day. That's sanctuary philosophy. But then, like the great American philosopher Mike Tyson has said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? And so there's sanctuary philosophy, and there's the philosophy of the battlefield. This is the philosophy of the battlefield, where you're engaged in the world, which is not, you're not protected from the world, you're deeply engaged in it. And now you have to have philosophy that is designed to give you agency, it's designed to give you clarity of thought and action. So it's a very moving, very dramatic 700 verses. It's a very deeply philosophical, but also deeply practical, very empowering. And so it's been interpreted and reinterpreted thousands of times. The Bhagavad Gita interpretations are from all different angles of philosophical inquiry. It's been reinterpreted. It's a beautiful book in the Hindu tradition. And usually when you see a lawmaker taking an oath and they're Hindu, the book that they're taking oath on might be the Bhagavad Gita, unless it's the Constitution, which is the other book. I do have a favorite translation. I do have a favorite lecture where I talk about my favorite translation, which is even better. So it's one of those one-up deals where I'll give you the entire lecture. One second. This is one of those timeshare deals. For hearing my one lecture, I give you another. So one second, let me find you that lecture. And now you have won the right to listen to that one as well. So let me find it. All right, Bhagavad Gita's unique place in Hinduism. Okay, I will send you this talk. One second, is right here. This is in here. I describe my favorite translation of the Gita as well. And also, this is a fun 3-hour talk because you can't have, this is 1.5 hour talk. So it's half of the time we've spent. So it's even better. But it's fun. You'll enjoy it because I've enjoyed making it. With that, my time is up. I really appreciate the time we've had together. I thank you again for your oath of service that you're taking. Your desire to serve humanity is well worth emulating, and I wish you all the best with it. If you do need to contact me, I'll drop my contacts in. This is my email.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I always
Thank
read
you
the
very much.
feedback. So when the feedback thingy comes around, I always look for the feedback. So if you all, I'd appreciate it. You can say whatever you want to say. You're not obliged to just say nice things, but I always look out for it because it gives me notes on how to improve.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much, and have yourself a good day.
Awesome.
And
Wonderful.
thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.
And good night.